And suddenly, the Rebbetzin Schneerson starts to scream for my father, come quickly. So both her husband and my father ran down the stairs to come and see what's going on. And they saw my mother standing in the middle of the room, just standing like she's frozen. The previous Rebbe called me in, and said, immediately let that young man in, I owe him a favor. So I wanted to know, who are you and what favor does the Rebbe owe you? My father looks at him and says, the Rebbe's waiting for me. He runs in. So when I had the chicken, I couldn't look. And I almost cut my and he starts screaming, you're cutting your finger, not the neck. I actually had an advertisement where I said, this man's, picture of me, this man spent time in prison.
Who put that out?
I did. Oh. He said, back off, don't wake up. My wife said, no, he needs a burial, he needs a Jewish burial. And wake up.
She went straight to the Mafia to ask for the body?
Yeah, the head guy. So this guy, the second guy, really is trigger happy. And he's really mad now. So he runs over and puts the gun to my son's head and says, I notice he has 3 other kids in there. I'm going to count to 10. If he doesn't tell us where the money is, I shoot this one, go and get another one. Eventually he'll get the message was serious.
Welcome to the pod. Alright. Welcome to a new episode of Two Chassids in a Pod. We're already at the 17th episode, I think. And we have here with us a very, very special guest. He's my personal rabbi and mashpia. And he's I don't know how to say it, but he's a very special shaliach of the Rebbe. One of the original ones.
Emissary of the Chabad movement, appointed by Rav Menachem Mendel Schneerson.
Lubavitcher Rebbe. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're 3 Chassids in a pod now.
Yeah.
So 2 Chassids and a Rebbe.
No, 2 Chassids and someone trying to be a Chassid.
We haven't got into that level of humility yet. So I have a question, if we could, just to start it off.
Sure.
I had 2 questions. I think they kind of tie together. And it starts with the origins. Why is it called Lubavitch and why is it called Chabad? When did it start becoming Chabad? Because obviously from the Balatanya he spoke about Chochmah Bina Dat, but I don't know if he gave the name Chabad Chassidut.
Well,
and then there's Lubavitcher Rebbe, which is the 7th already. So what's the story there?
Okay. The name Chabad, as you mentioned, is the acronym from Chochmah Bina and Dat, Ches Beis Dalet. So that's Chabad. In general, there are 10 Sefirot. We're now in the time of Sefirot HaOmer, so it's apropos that we talk about it a bit. We're in this. So in the Sefiros, there are 10 Sefiros. 3 of them are known as the intellectual part. That's the Chochmah, the Bina and Das. There's 3 aspects of the brain, the way the brain works. Chochmah is the intuitive blitz of an idea that comes to you, but at that point you really don't have a grasp of it.
It's like that aha moment.
It could that light bulb shining up, and the eureka, and that moment is, although you have the idea, you don't have a grasp of it yet. So that it, as fast as it came in, it could leave you also, and you could lose it. That's why many times we get an idea and we say, "What was that idea? What was that idea?" You can't grasp it. You just missed it.
Walking here, and my wife was like, "You're about to say something," and I don't know.
So that's the chokhmah. That's the blitz. And then there's from Bina is the second part of it, where you take that idea and you expand on it, get the details, you say breadth and length and depth, and you're at that point you already can explain the idea already. Das is called the bridge, and Das is the bridge between the idea with its details and actually carrying it out. Most ideas that people have, and many people have a lot of good ideas, but they don't come to fruition. Why? because the problem is in the da'as. Da'as is the idea of a union. It comes from the Hebrew word when man knows woman in an intimate way. That's called da'as. Adam yoda is chava. That's the idea of the intimate relationship. In other words, where you take this idea and you now make it part of you. It becomes so much part of you that you almost can't live without carrying it out. Only then will you be able to cross that bridge into action. Wow. And that's the motivation factor. That's the da'as. When you make it, you bond with it and make it your idea, so that you can't live without it and you'll carry it out. So that's the intellectual aspect. Then there's the 7 emotive characteristics of the spheres: Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes is more of an proactive, where you go out and do something. Chesed, you're kind, you loving kindness, the idea that you want to give, you want to expand. Gvura is the opposite in the sense that it wants to withdraw, it wants to hold back. It doesn't want to give to something that's not worthy of having this kindness. And comes along Tiferes. Tiferes acts as a mediator, so to speak. He comes, which is this week's sphere that we're dealing with, and it is an idea of where Tiferes modifies the Chesed and the Gvura so that they can work together. Like this, they're two opposites. There's no way they could work together. Comes along Tiferes, in a certain sense, modifies. How is it modified? It gives credence to both of them. The Chesed doesn't want to hear from Gvura. I want to give. It's the right thing to do. Gvura says it's not right to give it to someone that's not worthy. Comes along Tiferes and says to Gvura, he says, you're right, he's not worthy. But let's go beyond that and do it out of compassion. So now that Tiferes has recognized Gvura's argument and said, you're valid, your argument is valid, you're not out of order like Chesed thinks you are. Tiferes recognizes the validity of Gvura, so Gvura is willing to modify its stand and say, okay, out of compassion, I'm willing to go along with it. And that's what Tiferes plays, that role of bringing them together. But all three of them are proactive. Then you have Netzach and Hod. Netzach is that push to break through all barriers and get the job done. The Hod is that power of submission, that I recognize something which is greater than I am, and I'm therefore willing to submit myself to that power. So it's not, none of these concepts, by the way, are negative concepts. They are all positive concepts, but from different angles, looking at things from different angles. And these two are reactive. Those Netzach breaks through barriers. The Hod submits itself. It's a reaction to something greater than itself. Makes space. Yesod again is like a foundation, is a bonding. It does the bonding between all the characteristics, all the emotional characteristics, and therefore it's able to bring it then to Malchus. Malchus is actually the passive one. Malchus, it receives and just passes it on to the next generation, or the next set of the next world, or however you want to present it. So in any case, so there's the intellectual 3 and then the emotional 7. So the Chabad, being that the Alter Rebbe had a major difference, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, as the founder of Chabad, had a major difference with the other his Chassidic colleagues. That they were all students by the Maggid of Mezrich, who was the successor of the founder of Chassidism, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. And these were all disciples. There were Rabbi Shneur Zalman and his colleagues. Rabbi Shneur Zalman was actually the youngest among all the colleagues. Wow. Nevertheless, all the other colleagues recognized that he was by far not only the favorite of the Maggid, but he was by far the most advanced. As they would want to say about him, we all sat at the same table, but he grabbed the cream on the top. And that's what his colleagues said about him. Nevertheless, they each had their own method and their own way, and valid. They were all very, very righteous people. In fact, the Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi said about the colleagues that under their table miracles were lying under their table. In other words, any of them could have done miracles. Was able to do miracles, and actually did miracles many times. But all of them were able to do miracles, he said, but it was below our dignity to bend down and pick them up. They wouldn't play those games. They were able to do they were miracle workers, but wouldn't play with those games. Wow.
Different times.
Mention a personal. I merited to study. I consider my alma mater in yeshiva was the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in Montreal, and the yeshiva in Montreal. Our mentor, our mashpia, was Wolf Greenglass, who, as a bocher yet, when he was just a student, the previous Rebbe referred to him as my mekubal. He was a mekubal already as a before he was married, as a youngster, as a bocher in his teens. And in fact, I heard the story firsthand from there was the previous Rebbe sent 9 students from Atvetsk when they managed to escape. By the war, there were only 9 who managed to escape from the yeshiva. And these 9, he told them to go to Montreal and open the yeshiva there. At that time, Montreal had no from a yid.
How did Montreal become such a Hasidic place?
Because this yeshiva, that's the previous Rebbe sent them
the
there.
The first place was the Chabad yeshiva?
It was this Chabad yeshiva, yeah.
And then came Square,
came others, they all came later, right? Wow. Much later.
Chabad was also the first yeshivas in United States.
In outside of New York and Lakewood, they were New York and New Jersey. They opened up. They expanded. The others told the previous Rebbe it won't work and and the previous Rebbe showed them it. But in any case, so going back to this is Reb Wolf Greenglass. So these all 9 of them were fabulous. Each one was a very special in many, many ways. And Reb Wolf, so one time they were all 9 went out together with a few other people to go out and make the blessing over the moon, thanking God for the moon, the Kiddush HaChedesh. And of course you have to see the moon. And Montreal, winter is not always you see the moon. It gets covered over by clouds and all that. And they were going out every day. You only have, really, according to the Chabad custom, there's only 1 week.
From the
1 week
to the
today,
15th,
from the 7th to the 15th. Right. That's the only days that you can really say the blessing, with the blessing to say it. And the blessing, but you have to see the moon in order to make the blessing. And they went out there every day, and it was cloudy, and you could not see the moon. Finally, they went out the last day, and they were standing outside, and it was cloudy. And Reb Wolf gave a sigh, and he said, if only we were by the Rebbe now. He could take out his handkerchief, wave it, and the moon would come out so we can make the blessing. So the other colleagues, the other 8 guys, looked at him and said, well, the Rebbe said you're a mekubal. Pull it off. You do it. Yeah, you do it. So
no excuses.
He was a very modest guy, But he wanted to do it because he wanted to be able to make the blessing. So he pulls out a handkerchief and says, "What do you think? You think if I go like this, that it's going to come out?" And as he did it, it came out. And so he made oh, it just happened, And the next day he got a letter from the Rebbe, "Stop playing these games."
I see what you're doing.
Different country, different side of the world.
You think he didn't know his own strength, or he knew it was going to happen?
But anyway, that's. But in any case, so all the colleagues of the Alter Rebbe, all the colleagues were capable of doing these kind of miracles, but they considered you don't play these games. That's not what this is for. Sometimes you have to come on to it, but don't just play around with these things. Right.
Yeah.
So in any case, so what happened was that the divergence was that the Baal Shem Tov taught that Chassidus, that the secrets of the Torah is meant for everybody, not just for the elite. Until the Baal Shem Tov, it was only the elite. Comes along Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, okay, and he writes the Zohar. He brings it down a little bit for more people, but still you're talking about people that are up there. It's something like you're talking about the guy that's way beyond A+, and he says, okay, I'm going to open it up for the A+ students. And then comes along the Arizal, and he says, I'm going to open up for the B+ students also. And he says, then comes along the Baal Shem Tov, says, this is for everybody. Every Jew is capable now of being able to grasp onto the secrets of the Torah. And so now here's where there was, and of course the Maggid followed that process. Nevertheless, there was there was an argument between the Alter Rebbe and his colleagues. What was meant by the Baal Shem Tov? Was it meant literally, or was it meant that the Rebbe, the tzaddik of the group, he should study the secrets of the Torah? The Chassidim should just follow the ways, though it's the customs, the minhagim, but that the learning, the actual studying of it, you still have to be on a level of a tzaddik to be able to do that. And that's what the Alter Rebbe said, no. He meant it for everybody to start studying the secrets of the Torah. But in a way, obviously, each one according to his level, but with a teacher, and the teacher should be able to bring it down to the point where even C students, so to speak, should be able to study it. That's why Chabad became known as the Chabad Chassidim, the intellectual Chassidim, because it required the Chassidim to actually study the secret, these Torahs and this deeper study. They had to use their intellect for it. Okay. They were known as the intellectual Chassidim. The other Chassidim were known as the Chagas Chassidim, the more emotional Chassidim. We just follow the customs of Chassidus and do everything Chassidus requires, but the learning, we leave that to the tzaddikim. That's it. Okay. That's how it's named Chabad.
In the times of
the Alter Rebbe, that it became, there was this divergence in the time of the Alter Rebbe, and as it went on, the divergence became even more because each of the Rebbes actually brought it down even more, made it more and more available to the Chassidim. And then there was, the name Lubavitch was that since everything, of course, is by divine providence, the place where for over 100 years, where Chabad functioned from the Middle Rebbe through the part of the time of the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe, it was in the town of Lubavitch. This town was called Lubavitch because they were known for their brotherly love. The name was given before Lubavitch was there.
Luba means love, right? In Russian.
Luba is Russian for love, right?
Lev in Hebrew.
But the idea of love. And it was the town of brotherly love. Previous Rebbe wrote memoirs of what this town was like before Chabad made it their hometown. And throughout you see that it was built on a brotherly love, every type of person, and mystics were always there, and it was
Amongst
this,
the goyim
before
as well?
that was Lubavitch. There was it was mostly Jews. Now today, there's actually the only Lubavitchers, the real Lubavitchers, they call themselves the real Lubavitchers, are not Jewish. the ones that are in the town of Lubavitch now. But anyway, that's the name Chabad
Okay.
and Lubavitch. That's
So talking about Lubavitch and Chabad, and you are being the shaliach of Chabad, of the Rebbe, how did that come to be?
Okay. Interesting.
Maybe let's start with
Idea.
the background. How did you grow up? Where did you grow
Okay.
up? Were you-
I grew up
Because you didn't
in
even
New
grow
York.
up
I was what?
Chabad. You didn't even grow up Chabad, right?
Well, yes and no. It was a very interesting thing. My parents were connected with the previous Rebbe beforehand, and we just thought it happened to be that my father did a favor for the previous Rebbe, and we understood it that okay, he had a connection with the previous Rebbe and with the Rebbe when he was in Paris, when my parents lived in Paris, but we didn't realize, and they sent us when they moved to America, so they sent us to Lubavitch Yeshiva. We grew up in Lubavitch Yeshiva. And so we did have the connection with Lubavitch. But we thought that the actual schlepping more to Chabad was we were schlepping our parents rather than our parents were schlepping us. That my father always made like he was still named, he came from Ger Chassidim.
Oh, wow.
Actually, my name, Yitzchak Meir,
The Rebbe.
is named after my grandfather, my father's father, who was already named after the first Ger Rebbe. So we went back a long way with the Ger
That's the Sfat
Chassidim.
Emet?
Huh?
Sfat Emet?
That was the Chiddush Harim.
Chiddush Harim.
Yitzchak
Wow,
Meir was the first
Crazy
first
story.
Ger Rebbe. He was the Chiddush
Yitzchak
Harim.
Meir. Rabbi Yitzchak.
And so we thought that he remained a Ger Chassid. We knew he had connection with the previous Rebbe, but we thought as far as being a Chassid, he was still a Ger Chassid. When we sat Shiva for my father, I'm the sixth of 7 siblings. I'm the second youngest in my family. And when we were sitting Shiva, I was already in my 40s. I was already in my 40s when we were sitting Shiva. I was living in Alabama already. And when we were sitting Shiva, one day, one of my nephews, one of the older nephews, comes running in, in excitement. He came running in excitement, and he showed that they had just come out another volume of the previous Rebbe's letters. And in that volume, he found 3 letters in which the previous Rebbe was writing to his secretary's son and to his secretary's son-in-law. 3 letters in which he mentions my father. And it's interesting that it came out actually while we were sitting Shiva. And in one of those letters, the previous Rebbe refers to my father as Echad Mi'anash, one of the members of the Brotherhood.
One of us.
One of the members of the Brotherhood. The Rabbeim never used that term except for one of their Chassidim, which meant that the previous Rebbe considered my father one of his Chassidim. That's the first we learned that he was actually a Chabad Chassid. We had no clue.
Only after he passed.
After he passed away, we were sitting Shiva for him.
All the time you thought you were bringing him
With
to the Chabad. It turns out he's a Chassid for years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually, it was an interesting story how he ended up with the previous Rebbe, and try and keep it just short, was that he used to learn. He was a sheikhet in Paris. My father was a sheikhet. Both my grandfathers were shachtim, and their fathers were shachtim. And so in any case, so my father was a sheikhet in Paris, and he lived in the same building as the previous Rebbe's cousin, Reb Zalman Schneerson. There was a Reb Zalman Schneerson, was also from the Schneerson line, and he was a cousin of the previous Rebbe. And he lived, my father lived in the same place where he did, and they became quite friendly. Reb Zalman was a lot older than my father. My father was a young man at that time, and in his early 30s, no, earlier than that, I'm telling you, he was in his 20s. Early 20s. And and Reb Zalman was already in his 50s, 60s, whatever, but they used to learn together. They used to have a regular Seder learning together. And one day, Reb Zalman shows him a telegram from the previous Rebbe, that the previous Rebbe was already suffering from the time he spent in prison in Russia, and he was getting paralyzed in his feet, and it was recommended that he go see a specialist, a foot specialist in Paris. And he wanted to come, but he didn't want to, with the tumult, a Rebbe goes someplace, all of a sudden the whole Chassidic movement feels they have to go with him. And he wasn't looking to make a whole...
It's a Gemara. If your
right.
Rabbi goes to Rome,
yeah,
you go
right,
to Rome.
you go to Rome, right. So he didn't want this whole taramka and this whole balagan. So he wanted to go quietly and secretly, that people shouldn't know. So he sent this telegram to his cousin because he needed help to have someone pick him up at by the train station. So he wrote him a telegram. He sent him a telegram, said, please have me met at the thing. I don't want anybody to know, and therefore make sure it's a Hamish guy. It's a guy, one of from Olam, but not a Chabadnik, not a Lubavitcher. It shouldn't be. So he turned to my father, knowing my father was a Ger Chassid. He turned to my father and he asked him, would you be willing to go pick him up at the train station? My father said, of course. So he went to the train station, and when he got to the train station, the previous Rebbe asked him his name. So he just answered, Yoel ben Yitzchak Meir HaKoyin. That was the only words he said to the previous Rebbe during the whole time that he took him around. The only words he said to him.
He was his chauffeur the whole time.
He was the one, not the chauffeur. He wasn't driving, actually. They were in the carriage together, but he was taking
escorted him.
He was the escort, yeah. So he was like an attendant, taking care of him. So there were a lot of stories in between them, but in any case, to keep it short, he took him around. And there was an interesting miracle that happened over there. What happened was that after he took him around to all the places that we had to be, and whatever, they found out, Chassidim in Paris found out that previous Rebbe was there. When they found out, because Chassidim have a smell for this. So
they sensed the Rebbe.
So they found out.
My Rebbe senses are tingling.
So they asked the previous Rebbe for Yechidus. So previous Rebbe agreed to have one general Yechidus. Everybody can come in together until he'll end with. So they came when it came to Yechidus. So Reb Zalman Schneerson turned to my father and said that, I can get you into the Yechidus also. And my father said, I'm a Ger Chassid. I don't think it's right. I should go to Yechidus to another Rebbe. My Rebbe is the Ger Rebbe. I'm going to go Yechidus. So he said, which is the way it's supposed to be, really. He was right.
Should be loyal to your Rebbe.
Not a question of loyalty. Mm-hmm. The idea of Yechidus is you're binding your soul with his soul. You don't bind your soul with a bunch of Rebbes. You bind your soul with one Rebbe. That's your conduit.
Like the Yichud room.
To draw it. What?
Like the Yichud room.
Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
On a spiritual level.
Right.
Wow.
So, my father understood that. So my father said, because I'm right. And Reb Zalman agreed, he's right. But then Reb Zalman said to him, but your wife is pregnant. You can at least chop yourself around and get a bracha for you. So a bracha from a Rebbe that year. So my father went in with the group. And previous Rebbe took care of it, right? And then after it was finished, the Friedrich Rebbe, what he was saying was finished. He motioned everybody else should go out except for my father. So Okay, so everybody else went out except the Gabbai stayed in also, because by that point already, the previous Rebbe already had his first stroke. And it was hard to understand him, especially if you weren't used to the way he talked. And therefore, the Gabbai would stay in by Yechidus, so that
Translate.
he could write that if the person didn't understand, he could say what the Rebbe was saying. Suddenly, the previous Rebbe turns to the Gabbai and motions him to also go out. Now my father gets nervous. Because my father starts thinking,
I didn't want Yechidus, I didn't want
things.
Yechidus.
That wasn't what his thought was. His thought was two things.
Amen.
The first thought was that maybe I won't understand. The Gabbai is usually in there. Maybe I won't understand. The second worry was that why would the Rebbe send out the Gabbai if normally the Gabbai stays in, unless if I did something wrong while I was attending? He didn't want to embarrass me, and he's about to give me a chelik. So he's a little bit nervous about that. So the Rebbe notices, and he motions to him, was fine, that don't worry, nothing bad there. So, okay, now the Gabbai goes out, and the previous Rebbe suddenly starts to talk very clearly. Till then, it was hard to understand him, but suddenly, he wanted to talk clearly. He talked clearly.
Wow.
My father understood every
It's
word
all
he
in
said.
Yiddish, probably, right?
Yiddish, yeah. But he really didn't understand what the previous Rebbe wanted. Because the words that he heard the words clearly. The words the previous Rebbe said to him was that tell your wife that the lightning is not meant for her. Like that. That's
How
all
could
he
anyone
said.
understand
That
that?
like my father was.
That's intense.
What's that about? But it was obvious that was the end of the Yechidus. That was it. That's what the Rebbe wanted to tell him. That's it. So he left. When he went out, so he starts. Now my father had a very tight schedule. That after he finished with the previous Rebbe, he had 5 hours of learning with different people, different shiurim that he had, Mincha Ma'ariv and all. So he came home first 5 hours later. By then, he totally forgot the message because, to start with, he didn't really understand it. So he just forgot to tell my mother the message. 4 months later, previous Rebbe had gone already, and 4 months later, my father is in the office with Reb Zalman Schneerson upstairs in their house. And my mother was downstairs in the dining room with the Rebbetzin Schneerson, with the wife of Reb Zalman Schneerson. And suddenly, the Rebbetzin Schneerson starts to scream for my father, come quickly. So both her husband and my father ran down the stairs to come and see what's going on. And they saw my mother standing in the middle of the room, just standing like she's frozen and not moving. And the Rebbetzin pointed out and told them what happened. A lightning bolt broke through the window, made a hole in the window, went around my mother, didn't touch her, went around, stopped suddenly in the middle, went back around the way it came and went back out the same hole that it went in. And that's when my father understood, that's what the previous Rebbe meant. that the lightning's not meant for her. In other words, the Rebbe was saying, listen, I owe you. I'm going to make sure this is not going to affect her.
Wow.
So anyway, so that was
crazy.
15 years later, my father made his way to New York.
Wait, who was the baby?
The baby was the oldest.
Your brother.
It was my oldest brother that we never knew. When he was 2 years old, he passed away, crib death. But
Olav
Shalom. His name was Shia. Olav Shalom. But then the rest. I mean, when I'm saying I'm the sixth, I meant from the second one on, from those that are alive, that
So you're the seventh,
lived
like the
through.
Rebbe.
I'm the sixth. I'm the seventh from the week. Okay, Kol Hashviyim Kav even. Okay, I'll take that. Kol Hashviyim Kav even. But in any case, so when my father came to America, previous Rebbe was already there. My father came in 1940. My mother was pregnant with me when they landed, and I was born July 1947. So they came in November, December of 1946. And the Rebbe was, of course, the previous Rebbe was already in America for 6 years. He came in 1940. So my father was offered a job as Sheikhet in Charleston, South Carolina. And my father didn't know, and he had to give them an answer that night. They had a few people they were considering, but they wanted my father. They said, but they have to give an answer that night. There was no way he could reach the Ger Rebbe to ask him. So he figured, then he remembered that he heard that the previous Rebbe was there. And he knew already the previous Rebbe was quite capable. So my father figured, okay, let him go ask the previous Rebbe. So he traveled to Crown Heights, but of course, in Ger, things work different than Lubavitch. In Lubavitch, you had to have an appointment. You didn't just walk into the Rebbe. In Ger, at that time, it could be now a change because it's much bigger. But in those years,
back then was Ger
back
that big?
then, Ger
Is the biggest
originally
now.
No, Ger at the time before the war, they were devastated during the war. But before the war, they were the biggest of all the Chassid groups.
And they're back still now, the biggest.
Yeah,
so
they're one of these. I don't know if they're biggest. The biggest
they're
now.
Top 3 in population.
What?
They're top 3 in population, from what I know.
Top 3 probably, but they're from top 3, yeah. But in any case, so when my father came to 770, so he went upstairs. The previous Rebbe was on 2nd floor, so he went upstairs, and he sees the setup was there were 3 doors. And in the foyer, in front of those 3 doors, there was a table with a chair, and the Gabbai was sitting there. The Gabbai was Rabbi Simpson, Allah Shalom, the Elia Simpson. And so he was sitting there. And my father, knowing how it worked in Ger, figured that's the way it worked in Lubavitch too. So in Ger it works. You walk over to the Rebbe's door, you knock on the door, and if the Rebbe says enter, you go in. If the Rebbe doesn't say enter, you don't go in. That's it. You don't need appointments. Don't need to be called. The Rebbe will decide who goes in, who doesn't go in. That's it. And that's the way it worked in Ger. My father thinking that's the way it's working. So he's trying to figure out which of the 3 doors is the door he's supposed to knock on to go in.
And then,
So he's looking at 3 and he's trying to find some kind. My father was very sharp. My father had his smicha and Schita, both, before he was 18. When he was 17, because he already was, right? And he knew how to learn well. It wasn't just Tamas Smicha. He knew how to learn well. And so he was like trying to figure out, he was an analyst. He was very creative. And he was looking on the doors to try and figure out there must be some sign of which door he's supposed to knock. And so
detective
he was,
style.
So he was like going from one door to the other, back and forth, all 3, and he can't see any sign. He's trying to figure out which is the door I'm supposed to knock on. And Rabbi Simpson is sitting back in the chair and watching this young man walking back and forth at all 3, looking at the doors. So finally he says to him, he says, "Young man, what are you looking for?" And my father had a terrific sense of humor. He also was very sarcastic. He hated stupidity. And to him, that was such a stupid question. He turns around to the Gabbai and he says, "And what do you think a Jew is looking for in a Rebbe's house?" So he goes, so Rabbi Simpson starts to laugh. So he looks at him, okay, maybe I did it in a funny way, but it doesn't required that kind of laughing the way he was laughing. She says, "You just come in?" He says, "Maybe in Ger that's the way it works." He says, "But that's not the way it works in Chabad. In Chabad, you have to have an appointment." So he says, "Maybe then you can ask the Rebbe in this case, because I need to give an answer. I need to know something. Give an answer tonight. Maybe the Rebbe would be willing to see me today. Can you go in and ask?" "No, I can't. He's not feeling well today, and I'm not bothering him." So my father says, "Okay, understands that. At least can you maybe take the question into the Rebbe, because I need to have the answer. I don't need to go into the Rebbe. I just need the answer." And he says, "What don't you understand? I'm not going to bother him. I am not going in. I'm not, I'm leaving. It's not happening. So my father tries to convince him. It's urgent. It's a family of five children already. And he needs to know what to do. And he's not budging. And my father is arguing with him a bit. When suddenly my father hears a sound of someone calling Yeche Yeche. Rabbi Simpson's name was Eliyahu Yeche. Yechel or something like that. So the previous Rebbe used to call him Yeche. So my father hears a voice calling, and sometimes you don't know where it's coming from. So he turned around to see if it was coming from behind him, but no. And by the time he turned back around, Rabbi Simpson was already going in the Rebbe's door, and he realized this is the Rebbe's room that he's going into. And my father was upset. If you're going in already, why didn't you take my name? You could have taken the question. You're going in already.
Mm-hmm.
And so my father just felt, okay, obviously there's nothing for me here. And he starts going down the stairs. As he's walking down the stairs, Rabbi Simpson comes running after him. Young man, who are you? And my father turns around to him, a bit ticked off. He says, now you ask me. That should have been the question you asked me before you went into the Rebbe. He says, that's why I'm asking. The previous Rebbe called me in, and said, immediately let that young man in. I owe him a favor. Oh. So I wanted to know, who are you and what favor does the Rebbe owe you? My father looks at him and says, the Rebbe's waiting for me. And he runs in.
No time.
So he goes in, he asks the Rebbe about the question about the Schita. The Rebbe told him 100% he should take the job in Charleston. Now, Charleston, he told me in 1946, there was no Yiddishkeit there. So my father knew that also. My father said to the Rebbe, but what about the chinuch of my 5 children? The youngest one of the 5 was 5 years old already at that time. Time for chinuch. And, what about the chinuch for these kids? So the Rebbe told him, the oldest one who was under bar mitzvah, he was 12 years old. He says, the oldest one, leave in New York in yeshiva, which was unheard of those times before bar mitzvah to leave someone in the yeshiva outside of your town. He said, leave him in yeshiva here in New York, and the other 4 you could take with you. Don't worry, you can rely on your wife. She will be mechanech them correctly.
Wow.
And so, okay, he got that answer and he left. Now, when he came out the door of the Rebbe's room, Rabbi Simpson was waiting for him. Rabbi Simpson was not a pushover generally. He was caught. He was caught by surprise here, but he was generally not a pushover. So he stood in front of my father and says, I'm not letting you go until you tell me who you are and what favor you did for the Rebbe. What's this about? So anyway, at that point, my father obviously was calmed down, and he said he was happy already. So he did tell him, fill him in. And eventually, the previous Rebbe made the connection between Rabbi Simpson and my father. They became very, very close. The families became very close. My father went off to Rabbi Simpson's son-in-law, became the rabbi in Jacksonville, Florida. Mm-hmm. So traveling by train, he always had to travel through South Carolina. When he used to travel through South Carolina, the previous Rebbe would tell him, going back and forth to New York, the Rebbe would tell him, whenever you travel to me and whenever you go from me, you need to stop in Charleston, South Carolina overnight and stay by Rabbi Lipszyc and verbring.
Wow.
There. And so that's how the families became very close. So he was one of the letters written to him. It was a lot of other interesting things with him, but anyway, very unique.
So your father was a shochet, and you say also his father was a shochet,
yeah,
and before that,
quite a while back.
It makes kind of sense because the Kohen Gadol wouldn't they?
Oh, you're a
the
Kohen?
would do the Schita. So it's very interesting how that goes down. Yeah. But you are actually not.
I actually learned Schita. The Rebbe told me to learn Schita, and my oldest brother.
You do.
My oldest brother and me. What we understood, though, that when the Rebbe told us to learn Schita, was for different. I understood.
Different type of Schita.
It was a funny thing. I was in yeshiva in Montreal, like I said, and one day Reb Wolf called me in, the mentor. Called me in one day, and he says, I'm sure you're aware, which until he told me I wasn't, He says, I'm sure you're aware that every month, and it's interesting because that's what a yeshiva is obviously what the Rebbe expected from them, that the whole of the yeshiva every month would send in a detailed report about every single bacher.
Wow.
Detailed report.
Were there big
So he said,
yeshivas?
what?
Were there big, small?
We had over 200 guys in the Zal.
Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore probably nowadays.
I would think that probably knowing that that's part of the responsibility, maybe they do. I would hope they do, because obviously that was what the Rebbe expected.
But there's no one to report to nowadays.
Yeah, you still send into the Hillel, or you send in whatever to the office, and the Rebbe gets it. The Rebbe gets it. He's aware of what's going on down there. He's watching. Anyway, so the Rebbe, he said, so the Wolf was telling me that, as you know, they send a report every month, and he says, this month we received back from the Rebbe your name circled, my name circled, and the Rebbe said that I noticed that when he writes to me that he has a very nice handwriting, it would be kedai that I should learn Safras. I should learn Safras. So, okay, so they set up for me to come back to New York and to learn Safras under Lezer Zirkin, Oliver Scholm. Lezer Zirkin was a very special sefer. He was not giving classes that time. He did it as a favor because Reb Wolf asked him to do it for me.
How would you, by the way, explain Sofer for people that don't understand?
Sofer is the scribe, the one who writes Sifrei Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzahs, checks them, does everything connected, making sure that we have kosher scribal work, right? Very good. And he was a very special scribe, to the extent that when the Rebbe asked Reb Moshe Feinstein, Olav Shalom, to start wearing Rabbein Tam's tefillin,
Rabbi Moshe Feinstein wouldn't wear Rabbein Tam?
He wasn't wearing until then.
Oh, wow.
So the Rebbe asked him to start wearing Rabbein Tam's. Reb Moshe answered, I would, if I could find a scribe like the old country. It's like the scribes in the old country, that I could rely on that scribe. Because his film. So, and he knew that in America there wasn't, in Israel there weren't those kind of scribes like the old country. And the Rebbe said, if I'll send you someone, and then he says, yeah, if the Rebbe will send me someone, then, that, and tells me that that's the kind of scribe he is, I'll do it. And the Rebbe sent him this laser circuit.
And you learned from him.
I learned from him.
So
I'm not like in that category. I'm just saying, but I had the skills to learn from.
So you did learn scribe.
Anyway, what?
So you did learn scribe.
So I learned, yeah.
And also
then
Shofet?
During that year, the
Schita?
Rebbe also told me to learn Schita. And so I learned Schita. And my mother, when I wanted to go on Shlichus, my mother knew I wanted to go on Shlichus. And those years, you're talking the beginning of Shlichus, parents were not very for it. The parents found it difficult. I mean, obviously they wouldn't go against the Rebbe's wishes, but they were hoping we would be from the ones that wouldn't go. But in any case, she knew I wanted very much.
Definitely don't volunteer.
Right. And she knew I wanted very much to go on Shlichus. So she asked me, she says, why would you want to go on Shlichus when the Rebbe gave you two such good parnassus? Be a sefer and be a sheikhet. Both of them, you make pretty good money. Why would you want to be a shlich that doesn't make a salary? So I said to my mother, you didn't understand. Rebbe was a very diplomatic person. He says he didn't mean for me to be a sefer or a sheikhet. He knew very well that Schita for sure, that I couldn't stand the sight of blood. When I first went to learn Schita, when I picked up, I had a good tfisa. The one taught me for Schita. So he liked my grabbing the neck. You have to really be good at tfisa. It's called a tfisa. The way you grab the neck and expose so that it goes very smoothly. He said I had a great pull. And the knife, he used to bang the knife and then go sharpen it. He wants to see you sharpen it. And he liked very much the way I sharpened it.
That's how they test you. They mess it up.
Mess it up, and then you got it. And he liked very much the way I did it. and he really liked it. But when it came to the Schita, so when I had the chicken, I couldn't look, and I almost cut my and he started screaming, "You're cutting your finger, not the neck!" So I knew that I wasn't meant to be a shaykh. So I told.
I mean, I can't.
So my
I
mother,
can't do that. I can't see the blood. I can't do that.
So now you have a kosher
I mean,
finger.
eventually I did learn to do it, but I was not very happy with it. So my mother says, "Why wouldn't you?" I said, "You didn't understand. The Rebbe was sending me a personal message in a nice way, diplomatic way. He was saying, what does Schita and Sofrut have in common? The very first halacha. They both start with the same halacha. When you learn the laws for Schita and for Sofrut, it's the same. It starts with the same law. A sheikhit has to be a Yireh Shamayim. A sefer has to be a Yireh Shamayim. The Rebbe was nicely telling me it's time that I should become a Yireh Shamayim. That's all the Rebbe wanted.
You should become, or that you already are.
That I should become a Yireh Shamayim. That's all the Rebbe was trying to say. Time to learn those first two halachas. So that's the way I understood what the Rebbe really wanted from me.
Wow. So at a time when the Rebbe picks, back then I guess the Rebbe started this whole shlichut movement. What tools was a shaliach given, and what age did they start? Like, what is that process of becoming a shaliach from the Rebbe? Not nowadays.
Okay, you have to understand. It seems to me, okay, I'm not saying this is the general understanding of the situation. I never really. I mean, I've mentioned a number of times to my colleagues, they never said anything against. They never gave me over the head like they did sometimes when I said things that they felt was out of order. But nobody ever said the same. I never heard anybody else say it. So it might be my own thoughts on this. Okay, there's a big difference between from the Baal Shem Tov through the previous Rebbe choosing shluchim and the Rebbe choosing shluchim. All the other Rebbes picked people to go out. They would take just individuals and send them to do either a particular shlichus or to move to a place with a particular job. Be a malamed there, be a sheikh there, be a sefer there, be a, something, a particular job that they went to do there, okay, in that place. And that was the way, and the people they picked were exceptional people. Were not just any
fit for the job.
They were not just fit for the job, but they were unique people in their own right. And any other groups would have chosen them as Rebbes. These were the type of guys. Guys like Rabbi Lipszyc, guy like Rabbi David Zaitchik. Even our day, these guys were really, really up there on the pedestal. Okay, the Rebbe. It seemed to me that the Rebbe opened up the shlichus. I just want soldiers. I don't need guys. I can take a piece of wood, a guy that doesn't even begin to understand what he's supposed to be doing in life, but go out there and do. And the fact that you're helping other Jews find their way back, that will help you grow too. And that's it. And he took a bunch of nobodies, a bunch of some of them, the original ones, were good guys. I don't mean to say they were nobodies really. They were good guys, but it wasn't of this category. They weren't right. But when it came, definitely by my time already, the Rebbe said, you see, the first ones the Rebbe sent was 1958.
2 years after he started already.
No, 8 years after.
Oh,
it was 1950.
I
mean, officially it was 1951 when he accepted it, but he was already the Rebbe in 1950. As soon as previous, that was it. Everybody knew he was the one that they wanted, and he was running away from it, so to speak. But still, certain people, he still accepted Hitler. He accepted certain things. He was already. He knew he was stuck with the job. He didn't want it, but he knew he was stuck with the job, and.
Wanted to be an engineer.
But in 1958, no, he was happy to be working for the previous Rebbe already in the three organizations that he was running for the previous Rebbe yet. The Merkis, the educational arm, the Machne Yisrael, which was the social arm, and Kahas was the printing arm. The Rebbe was happy doing that.
You think it was hard for him particularly because he kept seeing the Frierdiker Rebbe as the Rebbe, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that's why it was
that
hard
was
for
definitely
him?
he kept doing even throughout.
Yeah.
He always spoke about the Rebbe de Shver. He always referred to previous Rebbe as the Rebbe de Shver. My father-in-law, the Rebbe. He is the Rebbe. There were times at the beginning when people would come to him and ask him a question, and he would say, "Why don't you go directly to the oil, to the Rebbe?" He says, "Yeah, but he needs an answer." He said, "Trust. The Rebbe will find a way to answer you." That's where we get all this. It's not something that we dreamt up because we needed a Rebbe to answer us. The Rebbe said this about the previous Rebbe.
Wow.
So obviously it holds true about him too.
So
We didn't make up any of this stuff. This was all the way back.
The Rebbe himself would also write to
the
the
Rebbe
Frierdiker
himself
Rebbe?
would go. He said, "Ask Alatzin." A lot of his answers with prayers, whenever people ask for prayers for certain things, he say, "Ask Alatzin. I will mention this at the Oel." The Rebbe always went to the Oel. The Rebbe was constantly there. And then there were times, interestingly enough, which is also those that say we don't have to go to the Oel. They have also basis, because there were times when the Rebbe would tell someone, "I will mention it at the Oel. I will mention to the Rebbe. I will mention to the Rebbe de Shver." And then he would go upstairs to the Rebbe's room and he'd come down and give the guy an answer.
That's very interesting.
So obviously the Rebbe didn't have to go to the Oyel. When he needed to, he could go into the room. He could go talk to him right then and there.
Wow.
So that was, and it is all we're getting from the Rebbe himself. This is not some dream that some guy came up with a method of trying to, there's basis for it. It's all based on things that Rabbeim have said in the past. Anyway, going back to the Shlichus. So, till 1958 was when the Rebbe sent the first guys on this type of Shlichus. What was it? It was a total new concept that really guys didn't know exactly, as the Rebbe termed it afterwards. He says, "Ze nicht gewusst mit was me estos." They didn't. I sent them out. They didn't even know, how do you eat this? With what do you eat it? With what fork? What spoon? What? How do I go about doing this? They had no clue. The Rebbe just told them, "Go." And if they ask, "Well, what am I supposed to do there?" He says, "Whatever you see is necessary."
Wow.
You go there and say, now this is really much more difficult than people think.
Yeah.
Why? Because when you come there and they ask you, "What exactly are you doing? What's your field? What you're doing?" And the guy really can't answer. I gotta stick around a while and find out what exactly I'm putting my efforts in.
While I'm here in Alaska or India.
So it wasn't those places. It was more Jewish-oriented places at first. Detroit, Florida. The first place was Detroit. The second place was Florida, California. California, you have a core from Florida. Yeah. So anyway, the guys went in 1960. Probably it was around 1965, maybe 1966, where the Rebbe already said that, okay, by now, when the first guys I sent, nobody knew exactly what this is about. But by now you see the success and you see what you're supposed to do. So now I don't want to call you by name to come and do it. I want you to ask me that you want to go. By now you understand it's a schus. By now I expect you to ask. So by the time I went out, it was 1950. Yeah, when I went out in 1970. So at that point, my colleagues, the guys from my kvutza, in learning for my years, I would say a good 70% went out on shlichus.
Wow, voluntarily.
We weren't all that many. We weren't that many guys. But in those years, about 70% of the guys wanted to go. Everybody was geared that they wanted to go.
And they were all granted, they were all given permission? You can...
Not all, but quite a few.
Then what happens? And you decide you want to be a shaliach? What's the next step?
So at that point, by the time we went, the Rebbe would say, find out what's available, and write them in, and I will tell you which place to go. So in my case, we wrote in, it was interesting, I had 7 offers, 7 different places. and I asked my wife before I wrote into the Rebbe, does she have any preference between those 7 places? She told me, no, wherever the Rebbe wants us to
How
go,
old are
that's
you
fine.
at this time?
What?
How old are you at this time?
I was 22 and she was 20, right? Or maybe I was 23 and she was 20. She was 21.
Early 20s.
21, yeah.
Just married.
We were just married, right? We were 6 months married.
Wow.
So I.
Let's go on a honeymoon.
So right. So in any case, so my so my wife told me that no, she has no preference. But then I wrote into the Rebbe. The Rebbe crossed out 5 of them, circled 2 of them, and told me the one your wife wants. And that was the first I had an inkling that my wife wanted. So I turned to her when I showed her the answer. I said, obviously you do have a preference. So she said, well, actually she didn't want the one that I was more leaning towards. I was leaning more towards Boston. She was leaning more towards Detroit. And so we Rabbi answered right, the one that my wife wants. So we went to Detroit. So we went to Michigan. That was our first shlichus in Michigan.
What are you given?
Huh?
What are you given?
We mean what we're given?
The Rebbe answers you Detroit. Okay, what do you do? What?
Nothing. Well, in that case, I was going under a head shlich that was already there. Rabbi Shemta was there, so he sat and talked to me about what he wanted me to do, and I went there thinking that's what I was going for, but obviously it doesn't always work out what you think you're going for. And when by the time I got there, there was something else came up, and he asked me if I would be willing to do that. And I said, listen, I'm here to do whatever. In those years, by the way, it wasn't like now, in a sense. In those years, what shlichus was, if you give me a broom and tell me you want me to sweep, that's fine. I'm shlichus. If I'm the sweeper, that's fine. I didn't care what I was, just being the Rebbe shliach. That's all I cared about. And I don't care what job you give me. So he asked me to do this, I did that. He asked me to do the other thing, I did that. Whatever he asked me to do. There wasn't a specific. Yeah, he had certain specific things he wanted done, but in between, you got a whole bunch of other things that by the way, I needed what?
Yeah, it sounds like that a bit.
It's not an internship. You generally, when you went on shlichus, you went there for life. I was unique in the sense that the Rebbe sent me different places. It was unheard of. People didn't even understand what was going on with me.
He decided. The Rebbe decided afterwards where you were going?
It was different. Normally, it doesn't work that way. Normally, it was the
like the core family.
You went. You were there for life. That's what it was.
And what's traditionally like? You go there and you open a Chabad
You
house,
go-
or you
what-
go into
whatever
another
the guy is
established.
You're sometimes going into an established place. Sometimes even if it's not established, you're going there to a specific work. For instance, when I went there, what he wanted me for originally, which Rabbi Shemta asked me to go for originally, was that I should develop a certain what's called like a brochure, like a
Magazine?
a pamphlet. It was just an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper folded over twice. It was called A Thought for the Week. This was really
Like a
the
Shabbat
very
journal
first,
or whatever.
but this was the very first Chassidus going out in English in a massive way.
Wow.
And what happened was that
What a schut.
my colleague was Rabbi Kagan. He was the one that would write it. Rabbi Shemta would pick what sicha. And the idea was not to say the sicha, not to translate the sicha. The idea was take out the point that the Rebbe, the lesson, the hayra'ah from that sicha. And in short, write it in this, on the front was a cover, inside was 2 pages, to have that short hayra'ah in it, and the back was sometimes I put something on there, something special, a thought, a concept of this, whatever.
Easy to read.
And that was it, and that was for the Shabbos to send out. This was the first thing in Lubavitch that was going out in English, and this was and he wanted to get it out to a much broader readership. And Baruch Hashem, I'd say that during that time, we were actually sending out 100,000 every week.
Wow.
It was ever coming out every week. 100,000 was going out all over the United States and Canada. Plus, besides that 100,000, there was a number of the other shluchim in Argentina, Rabbi Baumgart in Argentina, and in France, in Spain. I don't remember what that was. It was going out in several languages. Several languages was going out that they were the shliach there
Would translate
get hours earlier, and he would translate it, and he would send out that the other languages. So that was the that's what I went officially for. Okay. Now, what he had told me originally was that he had hired someone because he got a machine, a big machine, to print it ourselves, so it would be cheaper. So he got this machine, and he said that he hired a printer, a shliach, to be the printer, which shliach was willing. Again, that was our attitude. Whatever you need done, that's what we'll do, And so he was willing to be. At last minute, he backed out, so I ended up the printer too. And the problem is that I'm not very good as a printer, and I got more ink on my hands than I did on the pages.
Those were probably different printers also.
And I couldn't get the machine to work right.
Wow.
And so finally I hired another printer. But we were getting it out. Anyway, it was going out. It was very good, very successful. It went out for about 10 years. It was going out. Very, very successful thing. And Rebbe had a lot of enough from it. That was for sure. But anyway, that was just one of the things. There was another guy that worked the camp, took care of the camp. Another guy was taking care of pushkas. And I don't think, it's not like today, pushkas. I for a while, he asked me if I would do the pushkas also. So I did for a while, I did pushkas a little bit.
It's a tzedakah box.
And but it was a very interesting reason why I wanted to do it. And he agreed that I should do it that way. And I found people didn't look. You're talking about having out pushkas in homes that were not frum. We're not talking about frum homes. We're talking about people that had no connection with Yiddishkeit, and they had pushkas. They accepted our pushka. They knew they had the what they called the blue box was JNF.
Jewish National Fund.
And so Rabbi Shem Tov smartly went and made this also a blue and white box, a dark blue. And that was the Chabad box. And so we got it into house. Actually, while we were doing it, we managed to get it out to every second home in Michigan. There was 85,000 Jews living in Michigan. We had out 20,000 pushkas.
Wow.
Yeah, 20,000 pushkas. And we would go collect it. We wouldn't have them sending the money. Not
All
like
those
JNF.
20,000.
We would go collect it 3 times a year.
Wow.
What was the gain? I found out, a very interesting anecdote. There was one woman lived very, very far out. She lived in a far out place, really. There was nothing built up over there.
Farmland.
Yeah, pretty much like farmland at that time. And it was quite a distance. And I had to go somewhere else. And on the way back, I was trying to reach her, because we always called beforehand to tell them that we're coming. Everybody would call, tell them beforehand. And her, I was trying to reach, I couldn't reach her. And I happened to be driving by her place. And I figured, let me just drop in. So I dropped in, sure enough, she's home. But she became very upset with me. He said, well, you usually call, why didn't you call? I said, I'm sorry, I was just driving by, I figured I would drop in. He says, you don't understand that when you call and make the appointment that you're coming, I prepare my children. They get dressed up in their Shabbos clothes. The rabbi is coming to collect the tzedakah that we gave.
Wow.
And it was a big thing by them. And I said, whoa, then I'm not taking it out. She said, you can take it this time. I said, nope, I'm coming back. Tell me when to come back. I'm coming back so that you can prepare the kids right. And
That's
I left.
amazing.
But then I saw that everybody thinks a pushka collector, schlepper that can't get a job.
It's so interesting, the
But
preparation.
actually, it's a way into the home and to put up mezuzahs and to put on film with people and to get. It was an opening into the homes like no other place.
I just heard it a little bit a while ago. I told it again yesterday that there was an avrech, a Chassidic avrech, in the kollel of Rav Mordechai Eliyahu Zatzal in Jerusalem, and he didn't have children for a long time. And his chevruta was Rav Yosef, the brother of Rav Shmuel Eliyahu. He's in Yerushalayim. He has a kollel there, and he asked him, "Can I go to your father to get a bracha? I don't have a child." So he says, "Yeah, no problem. I'll set it up." He sets up one-on-one time with the Rebbe, and he gets to go to Rav Mordechai, and Rav Mordechai tells him, "Ben Zachar Hashana, you can have a child this year." The year passes, no child. So the Chassid comes back to his chevruta, the son of the Rav, and he says to him, "I know your father's a tzaddik. Whatever reason the bracha didn't come through, it's on my part. But I'm asking if I could get another chance to go to him." He says, "No problem, I'll speak to my father." Speaks to him, he comes. This time the Chassid shows up, a lot more prepared. The Rebbe gives him a bracha, Ben Zachar Shana, Brit Milah Shana. Like double bracha. The son comes up to the Rav afterwards and says, "Kvod Rav, Abba, what was it? You gave such a different bracha this year. Last year you gave a bracha and it didn't even happen. This year you gave a more powerful bracha and you seemed a lot more sure." He says, "When the Brit Milah happens, tell me, I want to be there, and I'll tell you what happens afterwards." Months pass, the Brit Milah comes, the Rav comes. So his son asks him, "Abba, tell me, you told me you were going to tell me at the Brit Milah. What happened?" He says, "You see, the Chassidim, a lot of them, when they come to a Rebbe for a bracha, there's achana, there's preparation that comes beforehand. The first time he came, he wasn't dressed properly. The second time he came, he had his gartel on, he wore his hat. He came as a kli, as a vessel ready to receive a bracha, so the bracha could work. I gave him the same bracha, but he came more prepared." So this is an amazing story of like, even though you're not, right, the Rebbe, right, you're a shaliach, but they treated you as if it's, no, this is a ma'amad, this is a special event. We're getting visited by a Rebbe, and we have to prepare ourselves. Right. Amazing story.
I think it was with the Alter Rebbe. He has a similar story. It was the Frierdiker Rebbe that someone came into him, and he wanted a bracha, but he made him something like cry, and then you remember the story? There's like someone came in for also some bracha, but he was like also pretty low life, I think, and I don't know. The Rebbe made him cry, and he went out. And the secretary went into the Rebbe. He's like, "Why do you make him cry?" I don't know exactly the story.
Yeah, but his son asked him. What happened was that he went in and he asked for bracha to we called, and the Rebbe didn't.
Which Rebbe is this?
It was the. I'm trying to remember now. It could be it was the. No, I don't think it was the Alter Rebbe. I think it was the. Must have been the Tzemach Tzedek, probably, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure who it was. But when he went, it probably wasn't Tzemach Tzedek either, because it was the, maybe it was the Middle Rebbe, or I don't remember which Rebbe it was. Okay. But anyway, he went. The guy came out and he knew the Rebbe didn't give him the bracha, and he started crying very much. What he called. So the son went in. So they asked him what happened. And he told them that the Rebbe didn't give me the bracha. And he goes, the son went in. So the son went in and asked him, "Why didn't you give him the bracha? This guy's broken." And so he says, send him back in. So he sent him back in. This time he gave him the bracha, and he had the kid. So when he left, his son asked him, why didn't you give it right away? Why did you? He says, when he came in originally, there was no way he could have a kid. He was not zoiche to have the kid. But when he broke down, when he went out, that opened up the gateway for him to be able to be zoiche to have the child. So that's why I said, now you can send him in. Now I can give him that bracha.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. So what's it? I'm Sephardi, right? So we have in the Sephardi world, there's a lot of kavod harav, right? The kavod chachamim, respect for the Rebbes. And I didn't grow up Chassidic. I'm very far from Chassidut. And in the past few years, I see that it's a big inyan, the Rebbe, the itkashut to the tzaddik, being connected to a tzaddik. What's it like being with the Lubavitcher Rebbe? What is that like? Because you look at him, it's like a king. It's
it is very hard to describe. But I once heard a very geschmacke word. Someone once asked me that who's the 36 Lamed Vav Tzadikim, the hidden Tzadikim. So he asked me, is the Rebbe one of them? So I was standing with another Chaverman. The other Chaverman right away said, yes, he's one of the 36. So the guy looked at the guy and said, well, he's one of the 36 hidden Tzadikim. He's well known. And the Chassid answered him. He says, you think you know him. Believe me, as much as you think you know him, you don't know anything about him. And today, we see that in actuality. So many new things come out about the Rebbe, different things since Gimel Tammuz, that we had no clue of people. This whole, if you look at the gem that comes out every these are stories that came out afterwards. These people, we had no clue. We knew certain people had certain connections, but we didn't know to what extent. And suddenly these guys come out with stories that blow you away. And you realize that we never knew the Rebbe. We really didn't know him.
Those videos of just the dollars are like, the videos
just
of the dollars,
sure.
I can watch that for hours. Politicians, non-Jews, Jews, Chassidim, Litaim, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, Rav Kaduri.
Yeah. And you see the Rebbe's reaction, the Rebbe's way he dealt with these guys, and and the Rebbe didn't hold anything back in the sense.
I saw one this week that he said, "Don't try to bribe me." He said it to one of these politicians, the mayor. I think it was the mayor of New York. Don't bribe me.
It was very cool. The Rebbe was.
I saw that.
I remember I was there when Kennedy went in. Robert Kennedy went to Chassidus. It was really funny, but because Kennedys were arrogant people, very arrogant people. All politicians pretty much are arrogant, but Kennedys specifically so. They were very arrogant people, and so Robert Kennedy, the idea that he was running for senator of New York, so of course he had to go to all these Rebbes to try and get the Jewish vote. So he called like a few nights earlier. He had an appointment to meet with the Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Teitelbaum, and he had, and just before the appointment, his assistant or whatever called. He's going to be late. He's going to be half an hour late. A few nights later, it's the Rebbe. He has an appointment with the Rebbe. And again, he calls the office just before. But he's going to be a half an hour late. So the secretary tells him, then don't bother coming. The Rebbe put away a certain time for you. And that's, if you can't make it, so forget it. And he was there on time. But we knew he was coming. So we were all packed over there. And he thought that we were packed there for him. We were packed because we wanted to see how the Rebbe would react with him. And so when the door opened, we were pushing to see the Rebbe, not him, and he was like, he didn't understand. He put out his hand, and nobody bothered shaking. He was standing like, oh my God.
I already went to the mikveh once today.
And then he wake up, so he went in, and he found out what the Rebbe really was, because by Teitelbaum we went in, and okay, fine, there's that. When it came to the Rebbe said, questioned him. I mean, he interrogated him. What is your stand on this policy? The Rebbe was very for the parochiate. At that time was a big thing going on. And of course he knew Kennedy was against parochiate.
What is it?
Parochiate. Parochiate was that the government should give money to yeshivas or to private schools and what you call it. And the Rebbe was very for it, of course. And so Kennedy, at first, Kennedy started double talking because that's what politicians do.
Politically
and the
correct.
Rebbe told him, the Rebbe stopped him right away. The Rebbe stopped him And this wasn't in front of everybody because they closed the door.
It's in the office.
It was in the Rebbe's office, but the secretaries were all there, and Reb Yoel Khan was there, who was the Rebbe's official chayzer. So Reb Yoel Khan told us afterwards what went on in there, and he said that the Rebbe right away stopped him. And as soon as he started double talking, said, "I don't want to waste your time. I don't want you wasting my time. No double talk. I'm asking a straight question. What is your stand on procreate?" And he realized he's not getting away with this on any double talk. So he said, "Well, Rebbe, you know that it's what you call that. That's what guarantees separation church and state is what guarantees freedom of religion. That's what can." Rebbe smiled first. Once he stopped him with the double talk, it was a shocker to the guy. So the Rebbe wanted to smile and ease him up again. So the Rebbe smiled. He says, "If anything, you should be for it. You have 10 children that go to Catholic school." So you should be for it. But obviously he could afford. He didn't have to worry about the procreate. But anyway, the Rebbe eased it up again. So then he said to the Rebbe, so he saw that the Rebbe wanted a straight answer. So he told him, that's what guarantees freedom of religion is separation church and state. And the Rebbe said, that's not what guarantees it. And the proof, I'll show you proof that it's not what guarantees it. You have England, which is not separation church and state. It's definitely a Protestant country, a religious country, yet the Jews have perfect freedom. But Russia is the epitome of separation church and state, and no freedom there. So it's the people who translate how it's supposed to be that make it work or don't work. It's not the separation that makes it work. And it was this. So Rebbe really put him in his place, and Rebbe spelled it out. When he came out, he turned to his aides, overheard him say to the aides, "Thank God I heard that the Rebbe does not tell his Chassidim who to vote for," because he was sure that the Rebbe was
not for it.
Not for it. So he realized that the Rebbe doesn't take side. It doesn't tell the Chassidim who to vote for. So he said, "Wow." He was heard over saying that. After he left, Rabbi Yoel Khan, told us that Bobby Kennedy is going to win. And we asked him, "How do you know?" He said, "Because Beam, the guy he was running against, Beam was a Jewish guy, and he was the incumbent, and Kennedy was the one challenger." And he said, because when Beam went, and he was of course in there when Beam went to, the Rebbe was there when he was telling what the Rebbe what he would do and this that, and the Rebbe asked him, "Why didn't you do when you had the chance?" And when Kennedy came in, "What will you do?" So Rabbi Yoel Khan understood that Kennedy's getting, and he did. He got it. that was the Rebbe's
foresight.
Right.
So many stories, Rabbi, so many places. And talking about places, you said earlier, like, you were one of the few that actually didn't stay in one place. Like, you were in Michigan, you started there, and then for some reason you had to go somewhere else.
And so then the Rebbe actually, the Rebbe had given me already, okay, to go get another place. There was a certain issue happened over there, which I was I lost my what would you say, my feelings that this was a trustworthy guy that I was dealing with, and it was my personal thing, and I wrote to the Rebbe that I just don't feel comfortable in this place, and the Rebbe told me, okay, you can get another place. So I was planning going on to someone else. I wasn't looking to become my own head. I actually had already a person that I knew wanted me. Actually, Rabbi Korf in Florida, I was close with him from before. As a student, the Rebbe had sent me as a bocher when I was 15. The Rebbe had sent me to Florida as one of 3 guys to help him make a camp, an overnight camp. There was nothing else there, and to make an overnight camp. I was a camp guy. That's the type of guy I was. And
still have that same energy.
I hope so. And there's a lot of stories with camp also with me. But anyway, I thought that's where I would go. I was looking towards there when suddenly Reb Mendel Futfas showed up. Mendel Futfas was an elder Chassid, the one that he was a legend in his time. He was an icon. He was the one that ran the whole underground in Russia, the yeshivas and all the mikvahs, everything. He was the one that ran it. He was the head.
Wow.
Eventually, he sat
Eventually,
he sat.
He was
in jail
caught
for it for 17 years.
in
Siberia.
Yeah. In those kind of places, and he was a very special guy. But anyway, I had a close relationship with him, and he shows up one day and he tells me that he heard I'm leaving Detroit, Michigan. So I said, yeah. And I told him the story of what happened. I knew he would understand it, and it was actually with his nephew, the situation had happened, and I told him the story of what happened, and he said, okay, but listen, what's your plans? So I told him I'm looking at these different places that want to have me. He says, no. The Rebbe needs guys that can start new places, new states. So I looked at him. I had a close relationship with him from when I was in Yeshiva in Montreal. So I said to him, Reb Mendel, I thought you knew me better than that. I'm not capable of being a head of state. I can do it. I'm working. I'm active. I like to work. But I should make the decisions. I should do the work. That's not me. I'm not capable of that. He says, you are, and he tried to convince me. And now, Reb Mendel was a very powerful guy, and he was very good in convincing people very well, but he didn't succeed with me. For 3 hours, he was trying to convince me that I could be the head of a state and that Rebbe needs guys like me. And I said, I wouldn't buy it. I just didn't believe that I could do it. And I said, I'm not going to take on something that's beyond me. And I don't understand why you think I could do it. And then finally, after 3 hours, and he saw he's not getting first base with me, turns around to me, he says, it's Meir, I didn't come on my own. I was asked to come to talk to you from the top.
The Rebbe.
Obviously.
So that did it.
And I was like, so I said, I didn't believe him at first when he said it. I said, so why didn't you say that to start with? He said, because the Rebbe wanted you to want it.
Free choice.
He wanted you to want
That's
it.
what Rabbi Buchatzir is teaching me, that the tzaddikim always want to give you free choice.
Yeah. And so I said, if you're telling the truth, if this is true, give me your word, that's what happened. And how can I say no? I mean, if the Rebbe's telling me to go, I'm ready to go. I'm always ready to go. So he said, go speak to Rabbi Chatkov, the Rebbe's secretary. I went. It was also another story, but anyway, I ended up in Alabama, to open up Alabama. And actually, I got after Alabama, then they called me in, told me, okay, leave. I had already built up something, and I brought down another guy, another young man. And it was a difficult place to break through. And I had no clue that it was a place that they tried and they couldn't get through, and that's why they dumped me down there. They didn't tell me what the situation was.
Where's
Said,
this,
go
Mobile?
there. What?
Mobile?
No, Birmingham. Birmingham, Alabama. I said, go there and do. And I went there. Listen, if this is what the Rebbe wants, fine. I went there. And actually, I got a tremendous compliment from the Rebbe 7 years later when they called me in and they told me that, okay, you brought down another guy, he's taking over for you, it's time for you to move on. And it was unheard of, especially for a head of state. To move a head of state was never done before. It was a weird situation. So did I fail something or did I do something wrong? I really didn't understand what was going on. Couldn't put my finger on something that I did wrong there. And then the Rebbe said to me that not everybody that leaves a place is because they failed. In this case, he succeeded way beyond what we thought, and we succeeded better and faster than we thought possible. That was the way the Rebbe put it.
Are any of your
and now time
sikhs
for you to move on.
in books? Like, could I open a Chabad book and find letters from the Rebbe to you?
No. And then, first of all, I had a number. Each time that I moved, another situation happened. It seemed like either the Rebbe or God, both of them, decided that I shouldn't have any momentous of anything, because after every move, I lost everything I owned.
Next.
Next.
And as
Clean
reward,
out this- it was almost like the Gemara says, I think it was Rabbi Zera, that before he learned Talmud,
He came to Eretz Yisrael and fasted 40
that he
years.
should forget the Talmud Bavli so he could learn Talmud Yerushalmi. It seemed like if I had to move on to the next place, I had to lose everything that I had before.
But now you're in Eretz Yisrael and you've gained the whole world. You gained it.
before that, they put you in prison.
Yeah,
Right?
I was the contract rabbi. I actually had an advertisement where I said, "This man's picture of me. This man spent time in prison." But
Who put that out?
I did.
Oh.
I spent time in prison. Yeah, I was the contract rabbi.
It's a great advertising,
What does
Rabbi.
that mean, the contract, Rabbi?
That, in other words, whenever they had Jews in the prison there, and they needed someone, they didn't have enough Jews for Baruch Shem, for having a full-time rabbi there. So I was on contract, and when they
okay.
needed a rabbi, they called me, and I would come. And I would.
You
So
scared
I-
me, Avidan.
Yeah,
I think I'm sitting here with the tzaddik, like Yosef. I didn't know you had a history.
Listen, all tzaddikim were in prison.
I went for
I
it
was
right
twice.
away. There's a story with the Rebbe on that.
No.
When the Rebbe was in university in Berlin. No, in France.
Paris, maybe.
In Paris, I think. I don't remember if it was in Berlin or in Paris. But one of those two universities where Rebbe was in both universities, I don't know which one it was that the story happened. Rabbi Lipszyc was there too. They were classmates then. And so one day the Rebbe got up on a car. And you saw that a lot of guys did that. They would get up, let's start a fad, let's start a new fad. So one day the Rebbe got up on the car, on top of a car, and he said, let's start a new fad, all Jewish guys, let's put on film.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it started there.
Already
Yeah,
before.
Started in
so long
university.
ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
We never understood until we heard the story.
Wow.
Rabbi Chadikov, when he would tell us to go, give us the speech before going on Shlichus, he would tell us, you have to be ready, jump up on the car and scream, let's go do this mitzvah, let's do that mitzvah. We didn't, it
thought it was
sounded
Guzman.
wild. It sounded
You
wild
didn't think
from
that's what the
Rebbe
Rebbe would
especially
do.
from Rabbi Chadikov. And then we found out that the Rebbe did this. That's where he got it from. So anyway, but it was
last you would
illegal.
expect.
But it was illegal to do that without a license.
What, to jump on the car?
To make a
protest
protest or getting people together. You had
A
to have
gathering.
what do you call it, what's called
Permit.
a permit for that. And the Rebbe didn't have permit. He got up there, so the police came and took him off to jail.
Wow.
And one of the Jewish students who knew who the Rebbe was saw that, so he ran to Rabbi Soloveitchik. He knew Rabbi Soloveitchik knew him, and he told him what he saw. So Rabbi Soloveitchik had
These
the name of
Chassidim.
So he ran right away to get the Rebbe out. So he went and then he managed to get the Rebbe out. When he got the Rebbe out, as they were walking out, he turned jokingly to the Rebbe. He said, "Now you can go and become a Rebbe." Little did he know.
It is, wow.
Wow, that's crazy. That's
You have any crazy story from prison?
Let me tell a story there's a number of stories, but there's one story that really is worth hearing. It's really a very strong, powerful lesson.
Where was this?
In prison in Alabama, in Montgomery, Alabama, it was a federal prison camp. I was the contract rabbi there, and I used to go there Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. I'd go with my family, and we'd spend Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur in the prison with the prisoners, and make a minyan and the original warden and chaplain that were there when I first became the contract rabbi were very laid back guys. They understood. I mean, this was a prison camp that was for people that were, the white collar crimes, the big guys.
Finance.
This is where Nixon's guys sat from Watergate.
Wow.
They were there then, and this was the high class guys. They were not even bars there.
Not
It was a
murderers,
prison
not
camp. They
none of
weren't.
that
It was
stuff.
only for short periods of time, up to 4 years. That's and these were the guys that were there, CEOs of companies and big shots. And therefore, they didn't have to put them behind bars because these guys aren't going anywhere.
They're not violent.
Because if they're going to run away, they're going to be sent to one of the bars. They didn't want that. They had it pretty easy here. Although it was still, for them, it was
Still
a put
prison.
down. It was the fact that the worst part of it was that they had to jump and do with the guards. The guards were literally half-wits. The guards didn't have all their screws screwed in. And we call these guards that they wouldn't hire to clean the toilets in their businesses, these CEOs, had to jump every time they told them to jump. You know, this was the worst type of torture.
Sounds like the
idea.
IDF.
These guys. So, but anyway, so these guys were really, you know, but they were there. They weren't dangerous or anything like that. So the warden, the original warden, and the chaplain who I worked with, they were pretty laid back. They looked away a lot of things because they knew they were suffering, and they weren't looking to make them suffer. You know, okay, you have to be here. You have to spend that time. It's bad enough. I don't have to make it worse for you. Okay, so he was laid back a bit, but later some crazy reporter that wanted to make a name for himself went and did an expose called the Country Club of Prisons, and put a whole thing out and all over national that these guys are living the life of Riley there. And of course he has to go and interview the warden. The warden was a shrewd guy, a sharp guy. So he comes in and says, "What do you say about the fact that people consider it the Country Club of Prisons?" And he shot back right away. He says, "I don't know anyone who wants to join this country club." And he goes, and I tell you even more, that any of these guys, if you offer them to be able to leave, they'll run. They won't stick to this country club. They won't be loyal to this country club.
No matter how comfortable it is.
Come on.
The man is supposed to be free.
But in any case, it made a stink, and Washington decided that they're going to move on this warden and what do you call it, and they put in the opposite type of guys in there, and really made it. So anyway, so these guys right away called me in. Did you read the rules book? I said, I didn't know there was a rule book. Nobody gave me a rule book when I got the job. So he says, look at each other. Yeah, another thing that he did wrong, you know. And he gives me the book, read this, and if you can't live with it, then forget it. We'll find someone else to be the contract rabbi. So, okay, fine. So I took it. And then they started, so meanwhile I told him that what I've been doing until now, and I expect the same. They tried to stop me, but they wish to send me. There's all kinds of stories there, but that's different stories. Story I'm telling is that he had come to a point where he wouldn't let me bring my family for Yom Tiv. So I went myself. He says, "Well, you don't have to go yourself. You know, they can do without the rabbi. You want to be with your family for Yom Tiv."
So Chassidim go to Rosh Hashanah
So
Uman and you go to prison.
I told him that. He said, you take off this, that. I said, the problem is I work for a man who wouldn't buy that excuse that just because my family's not going doesn't mean I shouldn't go. But the Rebbe obviously wouldn't accept such an excuse for me. So I said, I'm not even proposing that. So anyway, so he said, okay, so if I'm insisting that I'm coming, so come yourself. That's all. So okay. So Yom Kippur, of course, there was nobody there knew how to daven. Nobody could lay. So I had to do everything. All the 5 tefillahs have to do it. I had to do everything from top to bottom. So doing it in a place like that, in a prison, and by the time I got to Ne'ilah, just before Ne'ilah, even I had a bit of Hir Tshuva. I felt, hey, listen, I'm in a place like this. It's time maybe I should do Tshuva too a little bit. And so I stopped before Ne'ilah. I finished Mincha. I turned around to the guys, and I said, guys, we're about to start Ne'ilah, which is the final prayer of Yom Kippur, final chance to ask God to forgive the past and to sign us in for a good year. And I said, with what are we making that claim? On what basis are we making such a request? It's a nice request to make, but why would God even listen to this request? Why are we deserving of asking such a request? I therefore have a proposal that for everybody here, me included, before I start, I'm going to turn around, wait 2 minutes. I'm going to meditate. I want all of you to meditate. Think about God, that you're going to take on a mitzvah for the coming year. Pick a mitzvah that you're going to do for the coming year. And on that basis, you're approaching God and saying, okay, I'm going to do this mitzvah for the coming year. Please forgive my past and give me a good year. And it seemed like I must have meant what I said, because and I saw on their faces they liked the idea and they're going with it. So I turned around back to the Amit. 2 minutes I took and thought what mitzvah I'm going to enhance. And then I started davening Nila. After we finished Ma'ariv, after shofar blowing Ma'ariv, and so you guys all went in to set up the room that I had prepared to have to break the fast. And meanwhile, while they're preparing it, I'm putting together the shul so I can pack up my car and go home right after we finish breaking the fast. So one guy comes in. Now, I had a class every Tuesday. I was giving a class there. But not everybody came to class, and there was this one guy that was a pretty new inmate. He was there supposed to be for 4 years. Comes in, and for davening, he came for Rosh Hashanah Kippur. He came for the tefillah. And he comes over to me, introduces himself to me, and says he needs my help for the mitzvah he took on. So I said, okay, if you don't mind my asking, what mitzvah exactly is it that you took on? He says, Shabbos. I said, whoa, it's not from the easiest mitzvahs to start with. I said, do you mind my asking why you chose Shabbos from all the mitzvahs? So I'll tell you the truth, Rabbi, I didn't grow up with this. I know nothing about Torah mitzvahs. I know nothing. I says, I didn't know what's considered a mitzvah. I'm trying to think and come up. I wanted to do what you said, but I didn't know what a mitzvah was. And I wasn't sure. So I started thinking. I remembered that as a child, I once heard that Jews have what's called a Shabbat. 1 day a week, a Shabbat. And I figured, that's got to be a mitzvah, and that's why I took it. So I said to him that, it's not from the easy mitzvahs. If you want, I can give you an easier one to start with. Tefillin, wake up. Rabbi, this is what I told God I will take on. I feel that's what I have to say. Far be it from me to try and talk you out of Shabbat. I mean, not at all. So, okay, what help do you need from me? So he says to me, I don't need the philosophy now. I don't need that, but I need to know what am I allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do on Shabbat. And I can't read Yiddish, I can't read Hebrew. I need in English just a list of the do's and don'ts of Shabbat, so I can do it. I can keep doing it. So, okay, come to my class Tuesday, and I'll bring with me a couple of books. Now, at that time, the only book that was out that had this, it was before Shmir Shabbos Kilchos, was out in English. There was nothing else out in English. There was 2 large blue books, thin books, that were the Laws of Shabbat by Shimon Eider in Lakewood. I personally didn't like those books because they were very dry. They just said laws you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. That was basically it.
Just the list.
Yeah. And I felt that's definitely not motivating anybody to do it. And but this is what he's asking for. So I said, okay, so I'll bring these 2 books to him. So I brought him the Tuesday, and he started coming to my class every Tuesday. And every week, the other prisoners that were in the class would say, hey, he's sticking to it. He learns at night. He learns for an hour or so. He's going through this book. And everything he learns that week, he keeps the next Shabbos.
Wow.
And he's actually sticking to it. Very nice, good. Anyway, this goes on for 6 weeks. And then I come the 7th week, he doesn't show up to class. And I asked the guys, where is he? And they said, Rabbi, you're not going to believe this story. I said, what? He says, you know the books you gave him? I said, yeah. He says, well, he read in those books that the Torah says that when the Jews will keep 2 Shabbosos the way they're supposed to be kept, miyad nigolin, immediately they will be redeemed. And he figured if that's true about Klal Yisrael, it's got to be true about every individual Jew. And therefore, if he's going to keep 2 Shabbos the way it's supposed to be, God is going to take him out of prison. And so the next 4 nights, he stayed up all night and studied by heart the 2 books from cover to cover, that he knew every single law. And he was careful for the next 2 Shabbos, the way it was supposed to be. And that Sunday, the warden came in and sent them home. Sent them home. So he left the books with them. But I kept in touch with him. I found out where he lived. He lived in Florida. I kept in touch with him. I kept in touch with him. 6 years I was in touch with him until I lost track of him. But in those 6 years, every Yom Kippur he would go to shul, and he was keeping Shabbos. And there was, for a year he lived in Aruba and he kept Shabbos. He was the only Jew there. He was keeping Shabbos. And then during these 6 years, every Yom Kippur he would go to shul for Ne'ilah, and he would take on another mitzvah. By the time I lost contact with him, he was keeping Shabbos, kosher, putting on tefillin every day. He married a Jewish woman, and he was something with learning. And we called it was, he was
Progress.
taking every year. Yeah. I said, let him live to 613. You got the guys keeping everything. But in any case, that was the story with that.
That's amazing.
It's unbelievable. We called.
Wow, he kept 2 Shabbosim and he was out of prison.
Prison,
That's
that was
insane.
it,
That's a crazy story.
Wow. Baruch Hashem, thank God we have mitzvot that you can connect. They're just connection points to Hashem, and you pay attention to the details. Like I have a friend that says God is in the details. He's an artist.
That's right.
He makes art here in Israel, and just God is in the details.
That's right.
Everything. Kvish Echad. What is Kvish Echad in Israel? The road that leads to Jerusalem.
Right.
One.
Right.
It's going towards
Right.
Echad. And just one last question I have for the night. The Rebbe's approach to Eretz Yisrael. Can you talk what it was, how he spoke about Eretz Yisrael, what he had to say about Eretz Yisrael? How
Okay.
you like?
It's a bit of a complicated thing, but the Rebbe was, first and foremost, was a supporter of the Jews in Eretz Yisrael and the security of Eretz Yisrael, and many stories connected with that. And the Rebbe was very much for Eretz Yisrael as the Jewish homeland, no question about it. Okay, the Rebbe was well aware that the government wasn't always the way they're supposed to act towards it, and the Rebbe did a lot of things to try and get them more on board. Okay, and they did. They respected the Rebbe. Although they weren't ready to do what the Rebbe wanted them to do, but they at least, the Rebbe modified their craziness to a certain extent. But as far as the Medina Yisrael, as far as the Rebbe was concerned, this was the Eretz Yisrael, not Medina Yisrael. This was an Eretz that was given to us not by the UN. It was an Eretz that was given to us by the Eibishter HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the 1948 CE, but before 2448 or 1948 actually.
The birth of Abraham.
The birth of Abraham was 1948 in the Jewish calendar.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was the real 1948, and that was the real time when the land of Israel was given to us, and we marched in. Our Yom HaAtzmut was not on Hey Eir, it was actually Pesach. The first time they walked into Eretz Yisrael was Pesach.
I say that because a rabbi told me once that there's the only free person you have is someone that deals with Torah. So he says a Shavuot is our Yom HaAtzmut because he makes us free.
Shavuot is not the Yom HaAtzmut, the land, because the Yom HaAtzmut connected with land. That was Pesach. They actually marched in on Pesach. Yeshua marched in on Pesach, and as such, that's it. I laugh because someone asked me the other day. Someone asked me that Yom HaShoah, what's my opinion, Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron.
It's right now.
And this whole week going on. Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, and Yom HaAtzmut.
Yeah.
So I told him the Eibishter made clear that it's not, they're offbeat. Number one is we already have these things. Yom HaShoah is Asar B'Tevis. And Yom HaZikaron is Yom HaZikaron. We have 4 of them in the year. On Yom Kippur, on Shmini Atzeres, and we call them Shvisha Pesach and Shavuos. Those are the Yom HaZikaron, where we remember all the people who passed away, right? Yizkor. And then the Yom Ha'atzmaut is Pesach, when we marched in the original into Eretz Yisrael. And so we already have this. Look what these guys do. They want to make days, and to show you how wrong they were, look how they did the opposite. Yom HaShoah, remember the remembrance of the we call the mourning, the day of mourning. When did they make it? In Nisan, when you're not allowed to mourn. In Nisan, you're not allowed to mourn. When did they make Yom HaAtzmaut, the day of celebration? When did they make it? Right in the middle of Sefirot. Hey year, when you're not allowed to play music, you're not allowed to have all celebrations. It's a time of mourning. And we call it the Yom and again, like I said, Yom HaZikaron we already had. So what was their thinking?
So it looks like
it
on
shows
purpose.
that I'm not going to blame them on purpose. But Milmila, they showed them they were out of order. That's all. They chose days that they weren't thinking, and they showed that they didn't know what they were choosing. That's all. But yes, we have complaints against things that they do. But then again, we still have to give them credit. They are protecting the Jewish people. Okay? That was one of the biggest disagreements that the Rebbe had with, that was one of the biggest disagreements the Rebbe had with Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum. Okay? That when Entebbe, the story with Entebbe, the Rebbe said it was miracle. Rabbi Yoel argued these are not religious people. They can't. It's not miraculous. It's from the Samach Mem, and the Rebbe said no, it's miraculous. And they gave their lives. They put their lives on the line for Jews, and therefore that's what you call that. That overrides all other affairs that they did. At that point, they were tzaddikim. So that was the Rebbe's stand.
When did Chabad come to Eretz Yisrael?
Well, originally in time of Tzemach Tzedek. In time of Tzemach Tzedek, they already came to Eretz Yisrael. Number of Chassidim came to Eretz Yisrael. But in 1956, when there was the attack in Kfar Chabad, there was a Reich Chassidim there, but there was the attack and the killing, and they were devastated. And the Rebbe right away sent them a message: "You go forward." And the Rebbe right away sent 10 Bochrim to come here and to liven up the place, to bring back the Yomf. And these 10 guys were who became shluchim later. There was a Baruch Shem Tov and Avram Korf and Yul Krinsky became the Rebbe's man in the office. These were the guys who were those 10 guys. That's Bochrim.
The 10
that the Rebbe sent. That send them.
So talking about Chabad coming here, you recently came here just like a few years ago. Before this, talking about going out of Exodus, you were also in a quite not so happy place, very intense place like Russia, Crimea.
Intense, not happy. I'm Baruch Hashem. The Rebbe gave me an attitude. I feel I got it from the Rebbe. Okay, I don't know where else I would have gotten it from, but I mean, although my father, my parents were also those type of people, but the attitude I always had was that whatever situation I find myself in, no matter how difficult, he says, I know that I'm going to laugh about it in 2 years down the road. Why not laugh while it's happening? Why be slow and laugh about it 2 years later? Laugh about it while it's happening.
Don't procrastinate.
Right. So Baruch Hashem, I've had that attitude, and even in the worst situations, I've really been able to just lean back and take it and roll with the punches, as they say.
Yeah, it's not a safe place. You told me many stories, like you couldn't go outside, also at night, right?
Yeah.
Like people wouldn't necessarily.
Russia's taking over now, Crimea.
Well, that's now. They took over in 2014.
Right. So just had a little break, commercial break. So yeah, you want to tell us about the story in Crimea?
Okay. Although there's a number of stories also in Crimea, very interesting stories. Although there's very interesting stories in Crimea, there's one. I won't say exceptional because the others are also exceptional stories, but this particular story a lot of people like to hear. What happened was, you have to understand that the Crimea, when we came there, besides being something you can't even think about it, what kind of a place it was, and definitely was like the Wild West. It was, in fact, there was one day, just as an introduction, what kind of place it was. One time a mother came to us and cried. Her son disappeared. And those years, it was quite possible that something Mafia killed, and if a guy owed $14, okay,
Could be
the Mafia would wipe him out
14
for $14. He would wipe him out, okay.
How much
And
was that
that's
then?
what
There
happened. What?
was it? A lot of money then?
It wasn't. It was.
So 1,000 shekels.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't 1,000 shekel. It was basically what it was. $14. If you could think about 1991, basically what 14 shkolim was.
That's
Yeah,
it.
Same.
Wow.
Same difference to the American dollar.
Wow.
It was 3 point
Five.
3 point something, 3.5,
Yeah.
3.7 to the dollar.
Wow.
So it was, that's what happened here. It wasn't even this guy owed the money. There was a friend of his that owed $14 to a Mafia. The guy paid the Mafia to wipe him out because he wasn't paying that $14 back. And this guy, he gave him two for the price of one because this guy happened to be there when he knocked off that one. He knocked off the friend too.
Guilty by
Friend,
association.
unfortunately, the friend unfortunately was Jewish, was this son. And I knew the head of the Mafia, one of the heads of the Mafia. So I went over. So my wife, I was out of the country at the time. My wife, I give her credit for this one. She went over there. She went over to him and told him, "We need that body back." And he said, "Back off! Don't wake up." My wife said, "No, he needs a burial. He needs a Jewish burial." And wake up.
She went straight to the Mafia to ask for the body.
Yeah. The head guy.
We're not going to snitch. We just want to bury him properly.
Right. And so he said, "Okay, wait, in a few days you'll find him." And they found him in a few days, and then he was able to be brought to a Jewish burial. But so that was the type of place.
That's just the introduction.
That's right. That's the type of place this was.
Wow.
Okay. Now comes along. What happened was that came Simchas Torah. Yontiv, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, we had, of course, things were happening, going and moving, and it was very lebedik, the whole Tishrei. And Simchas Torah, my custom was always, because I was on Shlichus all the years, and on Shlichus you always ended up in a place pretty much yourself. You're starting new places. When you start a new place, you don't have a bunch of Chassidim over there dancing and giving you the keiach so that you can rest a little bit while the others are dancing. No, if you want to keep going, you got to keep dancing and not stop, because the moment you stop, it's over. So you don't want
no shifts.
You don't want a hakafis to go for 1 hour. You want it to go for a few hours. You want it to be a memorable time. So I always used to make kiddush on a glass full of vodka And that way, I didn't know when to stop.
That will carry you through
So
the
that would
holiday.
carry me through, even go beyond what my keiches were, my normal keiches were, and I was able to hold out. So in any case, so that it was one of the first years that I was there, and in Crimea, and we had a kafis. I made kiddush on vodka, and just as down as what they're called, chasers. We drank a few more cups, and we
vodka?
So vodka.
As chaser for vodka, you got more vodka.
Right. But in any case,
That's Russia.
Right, Russia. I had to fit in. So
When in
we were
Russia?
so I was a little bit a little high. Not that much, really. I still knew what was going on.
The
around.
kedusha, though, you're
But,
doing it with kedusha in mind too.
Hopefully that was my thoughts. But in any case, so we actually were able to keep the dancing going till 11:45 at night. And at 11:45, at that point, the others were tired. They didn't drink as much vodka. But at that point, so I invited everybody to come over to my house to continue Fabrein in the meal. Join us for the Sudas Yontif. So we had about 40 people, whatever it was, that came home with us, and we sat and Fabreined. We finished at about 1:45. And that's when everybody went home except for Ida. I'll soon explain who Ida was. But before that, I have to explain what I did. I had hired my secretary's husband. It was interesting. Almost everybody there that we dealt with was named Sasha. So my secretary was Sasha.
Or Alex.
Her husband was Sasha, and they had 2 daughters that they named Sasha. I could never figure that out. And then there was a dog that used to hang around that was also given the name Sasha. So Sasha was the name. But in any case, so this Sasha, the husband, Sasha, I hired him to watch my sukkah. Why? Explain to you what happened the year before. Not to us, Baruch Hashem, but I didn't want it to happen to us. In another city, there was someone else put up, not a Chabadnik, put up a sukkah. It was a group of guys, put up a sukkah, a prefab sukkah. Those of you that know what the prefab sukkahs look like, it's cloth, blue and yellow, with brachas all over them, pictures of Lulav and Esrogim and that kind of thing. These are the prefab sukkahs. So they put up the prefab sukkah the day before, and they wake up the first day of Sukkot in the morning to find the frame, but none of the material. Material's all gone. 2 days later, they see women walking in the street with new dresses, blue and yellow dresses, with brachas all over them. They called on them. And so I didn't want to wake up in the morning.
Russian are not known for their fashion, really.
And I did not want to wake up in the morning with an unkosher sukkah and then not be able to eat a sudzyantiv. So Mela, I hired this guy. I told him, your job is just to watch that nobody walks off with the material on this sukkah. And that's your job. And so he did it. So during the whole week, first of all, the sukkah, the reason was because the sukkah was outside. We couldn't build the sukkah on our property. We had to do it outside the gate, because in the gate was all trees, and you couldn't have the sukkah there. So we built it outside the gate. So I had a car. I had him sit in the car during the first days and during Chol Hamoed, the intermediate days. But when it came to the last days, we were having parties every night, and then for the last days, we had Bochum, we had rabbinical students that were helping us, and rabbinical students that wanted sent to other cities to make lively in other cities. So I sent my car with these other students with a sukkah mobile, with a sukkah attached on the back of it with a trailer, and they went to another town called Yevpatoria. And there we were in Sefirot, which was the capital city, Sefirot, and they went to Yevpatoria for the last days. And I had 5 sons that were still at home. The rest of my older children, I have 12 children. All the 7 older ones were off in America, different places. Some of them were married already, and the 5 younger ones were home. But the oldest of the 5, he was about 12 years old. He was still before his bar mitzvah because he sent away for his bar mitzvah. So he was about 12, and he went with them to the Yevpatoria. So he wasn't home, but the other 4 were home during this story. And so the guard, I couldn't have him sitting outside because it was cold. It was too cold at night to sit outside. So I had a separate room inside the gate. But I told him I need him to keep going out. So I told him every 15 minutes, I want you just to go outside, give a look, so at least you'll catch them in the middle if they do want to start taking it apart. It'll take them more than 15 minutes. So
the guard was there just for the sukkah.
So the guard was just there for the sukkah. That's it. So he was in that room and so sure enough, 1:45, everybody leaves. He goes and locks the gate, goes into his room, and meanwhile, my wife was exhausted because all the cooking over Yontiv and everything was doing, and not sleeping at night, and I also was having a little bit of mashke, and also, so my wife fell asleep. She was exhausted. She fell asleep right on the table, right by the table, her head down on her hands on the table. And that's where she was sleeping. She couldn't even get in the house. This was Simchas Torah at night already, and she was out cold. Me, I was able to make it to my bed. I got to my bed and I lied down because I was also quite tired. I also didn't sleep and also had a little bit imbibed a bit, and so I was tired too. And we both forgot about Ida. This woman Ida was what in America they would call a bag lady. A bag lady is basically a woman who never doesn't have a place. She lived around the corner from us in a little room that you couldn't call a room. You could call it a closet, without windows, without bathroom, without without a sink, without running water inside. She would have to go outside to get from the pump that was every several blocks, and that's the way she lived. And the way she managed to buy food was she would go through the garbage dumps and take bottles that she could get the deposit for, and with those few kopecks, she was able to buy food to eat. And that's the way she was living. It seemed like she was from a better background a bit, because we noticed that she actually kept herself somewhat clean. She would go twice a week to the vana, to the bathhouse, where she would take a bath and or shower, whatever, and keep herself somewhat clean. And my heart went out to her that this is the type of life. Not that we had nothing either. When they sent us on shlichus, you had to make your own, and I wasn't doing too well in the finances, and we didn't have, but this really bothered me. So I called her in one day and I asked her, how much do you make on collecting these bottles? And she told me it turned out to be about $8 a month. So I told her, I'll make a deal with you. If you don't go to the garbage dumps anymore, I will give you $10 a month. I'll give you $10 a month, so you're ahead of the game, and you'll just don't go to the garbage. I just don't want you going to the garbage anymore. So she was. You saw she was. I don't want any charity. So I said, you know what? It won't be charity. I'll ask you to work for me, do a job for me. So what kind of job? I said, since you come to me anyway Friday night and Shabbos to eat by me, she's one of my guests, regular guests. I said, I want you Shabbos night. You'll wash. I didn't have to. We all served paper plates and all these things, so most of the things went in garbage. But like a pot, and that's what I'm paying you $10 a month for that job. And she agreed. She agreed to it, and that's what she was doing. But of course, when Shabbos night would turn into a yontiv or something, you can't work on yontiv for the money. So tonight's different, not. But that night was Shabbos night, was Simchas Torah, and my wife was exhausted, and I was out of it a bit, and so we forgot to say anything to her. So she was standing there. She stayed to wash these few pots and whatever it was. Anyway, so this is at 1:45. Everybody left. The guard, 15 minutes later, 1:00, he goes to check the sukkah. He knows the gate is open. He locked it. He opens the door. He looks out. Doesn't say anything. Everything seems quiet. Closes it and locks it again. Goes back to the room. 15 minutes later, 1:15, again he goes to the thing, and the door is open again. And he pulls open the door and looks out. Again, everything seems quiet, but then he notices that the lights in the sukkah are off. He knows that we don't turn on and off the lights on Yontif. So it's funny. So he goes to look in the sukkah, and that's when they jumped him. 3 guys with guns and knives jumped him, and so he gave a yelp. Now, when he gave this yelp, so my wife woke up. She was lying. She was head down on the table. She heard a yelp. She woke up and sounded like a child's yelp. There was a knife against his throat. So it sounded like a child's yelp, and she right away thought one of the kids is outside. And what's he doing outside in the middle of the night? So without thinking, she ran to the door and opens up the locked door. And all of a sudden, 3 guys push in with guns and knives and tell her that, okay, don't get nervous. This is just a holdup. This is just a robbery. And I'm sure that my wife was thinking, says, oh, just a robbery, come on in.
I make tea. That's all I have.
But anyway, whatever. Obviously, she didn't respond that way, but she was, but they were in. And they pulled masks over their, as we called it, over their faces. And they come in, and they tell her that the word on the street is that you have $1 million, and we came to make it a little lighter for you. To take your money for you.
And you're snoring.
You. I was in my bedroom. I was sleeping. Now, my wife was convinced that I was sleeping for at least an hour and a half or 2 hours. It wasn't true. When I came out already, I looked at the clock, and it was 1:45. So I know that I wasn't even sleeping a half an hour. But my wife's convinced, so I won't fight with her on that. But I happened to look at the clock. So I do know that I wasn't out that long. But in any case, so they pulled in the guard. They had him lay on the floor, and they were pointing one gun at him. And my wife sat down on the bench. We had benches. We didn't have anything in the house. We didn't even get our furniture yet from America when we came to Crimea, when we were there this time. It was a couple of years later, but it was still, we didn't have yet our furniture. And so we had built for the camp, we had built a rickety wooden table, 3 tables, and benches, and that's what we had. And we didn't even have bookcases, so for our Sfarim that we had, I had taken orange crates, milk crates, and we piled them up one on top of the other, and that was our bookcases. There were holes in the walls. The tablecloths, we had sheets for tablecloths, sheets with holes in the sheets, and we had an outhouse. And we didn't like the idea of an outhouse, so we started building a bathroom, but it wasn't a working bathroom yet, and it was cement walls, and so it definitely did not look like the house that a millionaire is living in. And so, she's trying to show him, hey, come on, you got to be kidding. If we had $1 million, you think we've been living this way. But they're not listening. They're convinced we have $1 million, that's it. And, of course, she couldn't tell him where it was. She must have forgotten or whatever, but whatever. She couldn't tell him where it was. So they're sitting there, they're starting to look themselves. So the head guy comes into my room where I'm sleeping, and I suddenly wake up, and I see a guy opening up the drawers of the dresser and wearing a mask. So I thought one of the Bachram playing a joke, playing a trick on us or whatever. I knew which Bachram I had. Type of guys that might want to play a joke. So I just sat up, and when I sat up, so he turns around right away and points the gun at me, so I understood it wasn't the Bachram.
Not a regular Verbrengen.
So he says, it was a Verbrengen, but not the regular. But in any case, so he turns around to me, pointing the gun at me, and he says that, the word on the street says the same thing to me. The word on the street is that you have $1 million here, and we came to get it. Came to share it with you. That was the word.
That's what he said.
Came to share it.
So manners. So much manners.
Yeah. So I said to him, you have to understand, like I said before, I react not the regular way when things happen. I just take a very chilled outlook on things. So I just looked at the guy and said, I'm sure that if the word on the street is that I have $1 million, that must be true, but it wasn't delivered yet. So if you leave me your name and number, I'll call you when I get it. It's exactly what I said to him. And the guy just blew a gun. He starts shaking the gun at me.
Oh my God.
And he says to me, this is no joke. And I said, if you think I have $1 million in a place like this, it's got to be a joke. There's no basis for this belief at all. Wow. So anyway, so he starts saying, so where do you keep your money? So I said, actually, I spent almost all the money that I had before Yontif. I'm left with $40, and so I don't have a special place for it. It's in my shirt pocket, which is hanging over there. So he goes over to my shirt pocket, he empties it down, he sees, sure enough, $40 there, nothing more. And what else do you have? I said, nothing. We just don't have anything. We're not doing that. So anyway, so he starts looking. So, okay, fine, look. And so he's looking, and then suddenly I realized that, whoa, it's very quiet now. So where's my wife? Where's my kids? And now I'm wondering, where are they? It's very quiet. So I get up to go look. And he sees me get up, and he turns around again to me, pointing and says, where are you going? I said, it's very quiet in the house. I want to see my wife and kids are okay. He says, they're okay. I said, well, you're not quite the trustworthy guy that I'm going to trust your word on it. I want to see it for myself. And he sees I'm totally ignoring his gun. I'm just walking. He's pointing the gun at me, and I'm just ignoring it. I'm just walking further. So he runs after me. He says, wait here. Give me 2 minutes. I'll go in and ready them for you, and then I'll come back for you and bring you in. So I said, okay, I'll give you 2 minutes, but not a second more. So I said, okay. And he goes out, he runs out.
Longest
He
2
came
minutes
back.
ever.
He came back less than 2 minutes. He came back. He knew I wasn't going to wait. I said, 2 minutes, that's what I'm going to do. So he comes running back, says, okay, you can come in now. Afterwards, I found out why did he want to go in first? Because the guard was lying on the floor with a gun pointed to his head. He didn't want me to see him that way because he saw already that I have a crazy reaction to things. Who knows how I would react to see that? So he wanted him to sit up on the bench like my wife was. So he ran in there, had him sit up, and then he came back for me. So I came into the room. So to get to the dining room from my bedroom, I had to go through the kids' room. I had the 4 kids sleeping over there, and I see as I'm walking by, I see the kids, Baruch Hashem, are still asleep. So I said, Ben Shalom, please keep them asleep through this. More chance that they'll get through this. Kids get up, you lose control. It's not. I said, let them sleep through this. Thank you, and walk right there. I come into the dining room, and I see that my wife is, to me, she seemed like she was sitting quite calmly. She was sitting quite there. The guard, his knees I heard knocking. he was scared because he knew the word there was that when robbers come into your house, whether they get what they want or not, you're gone. You're gone.
No witnesses.
That's right. No one
Did you
lives
notice?
through it. I knew it. But anyway, listen, the Eibishter runs the world, not what we call, not the guards, and not these crooks. So whatever the Eibishter decide, whatever. You see how the story develops. That what my thinking was on this. So I come into the, so I said to my wife, "I'm glad to see that you're sitting calm." She said, "Calmly, I'm not calm." That you're relatively calm. What's going on? You're relatively calm. Nothing to be ashamed of, be embarrassed of. And I sat down. Anyway, so again, they're trying to get us to tell what we got, and we try and convince them that there's nothing. So he starts sending around as he starts telling guys to start looking. And meanwhile, they try and convince us that we should tell them where the money is, and we're not telling them because there's no money. So finally, the head guy says, "You know what? I saw you have your kids over there in the room. I'm going to take one of your kids as a hostage, and when you come up with $1 million, we'll bring him back." So, and he sends the second guy to go wake up one of my kids. I turned to him very seriously, and I said, "I wouldn't do that if I was you." Guy looks at me. Sounds like I'm telling him what to do. I wouldn't do that if I was you. So he looks at me and he says, "Why do you say that?" I said, "I don't understand something. When you came in, you told us that you're professionals and you do this for a living. Did you ever come across such a reaction before in one of the houses that you came in and you were holding people by gunpoint, and the two hosts are sitting there so calmly and quietly and allowing you to do what you want and not showing any nervousness? Did you ever see this before? Let me explain to you what's going on." I said, "You see, we are believing Jews. We believe in God. And God is the one that runs this world. God is watching what's going on over here. I know that God is watching this thing. And if God decided that we have to go through this, okay, that's his decision. And if God decides that I'm going to be dead tomorrow morning, guess what? Whether you intend to kill me or not, tomorrow morning I'm going to be dead. And if God decides I'm going to be alive tomorrow morning, you can take that gun and put it right against the temple of my head and pull the trigger, every single bullet in that gun into my head. And tomorrow morning I'll still be alive. It's all in God's hands. The only problem is I really don't know what God decided yet. So me, from my standpoint, what I did was I realized my life was in danger, so I said my last prayers. So now I can afford to just sit back and relax and wait to watch this scenario go through. Whatever happens, happens. God's in control, and he's going to decide what he wants. And he probably already decided what he wants, and that's it. I don't, there's nothing I can do about it. So I said my prayers. That's all I can do about it, and I'm ready to just sit back and watch what's going on. That's it. But now you want to add a new thing in this scenario. You want to take my son as a hostage. For that, Torah tells me I have to react differently. I need to get up and try and stop you. So now what's going to happen is I'm going to get up to try and stop you, and you're going to lose it, and you're going to shoot me. And so it's going to become tumultuous, it's going to become a balagan, it's going to be noisy, you're going to have to run. Like this, everything's quiet, you can go look, maybe you'll find something you like in the house. But like this, you're going to run without anything. So you have no gain, we have no gain, and it's stupid. It's a stupid move. Forget about the hostage. Meanwhile, the other guy comes in with the oldest of the 4 sons that were left there. He was 10 years old, and he brings the other guy comes in and holding him. My wife was hoping that he wouldn't see the guns, so she motioned to my son to come to her, so lean on her, so that possibly wouldn't see the guns. So he tries to go to my wife, and this guy is holding him, and the leader says to him, "Let him go to his mother." So I saw already that the leader was agreed that he's not taking him as a hostage. So he comes, and this guy is really more trigger happy, the second guy. And he's ticked off. Wait, 1 second. I thought we'd take him as a hostage. He didn't hear my speech. My wife laughed afterwards when she wrote up the story. She said that she was sitting there in amazement watching me give this speech, because she said I sounded like a professor in the university giving a theoretical speech. She said,
according to my theory, you're not going to like the outcome of this.
She was like totally wiped away, trying to figure out what's going on, with my head, But in any case, this guy, the second guy, really is trigger happy, and he's really mad now. So he runs over and puts the gun to my son's head and says, I notice he has 3 other kids in there. I'm going to count to 10. If he doesn't tell us where the money is, I shoot this one, go and get another one. Eventually he'll get the message was serious.
And you speak Russian, obviously.
No, this was going on in English, but they knew a little bit of English. Especially the head guy knew English. So I give the head guy a look that he saw in my eyes. Okay, you just lost control. I'm standing up now. That's it. It's over.
Yeah.
And he saw me move, and he right away screamed at the other guy, get out of here. I'm handling the people. You go out and look over in the other room, see what you can find. And he threw him out of the room. He threw the second guy out of the room. And So now we can chill out again.
So
sit back, okay, fine. And meanwhile, you hear banging all over the house. They were throwing over closets, and they were going through everything, throwing paintings off the wall, and trying to find where we have this money hidden. And of course, they didn't find anything. They weren't able to find anything. But in any case, meanwhile, we're sitting there. And there were a lot of miracles that were going on, by the way, here. First of all, the head guy had taken my wife's jewelry box. Now, my wife didn't really have any jewelry. I bought her one thing. She had some pearls and maybe a bracelet. But she had some jewelry, real jewelry from her grandmother. Also, a little bit, not a lot, was in this. But in the box was also the Rebbe's dollars that we had gotten.
So that's the only thing I was thinking.
The Rebbe's dollars.
The Rebbe's dollars.
And we had also the little book called Razil Hamal.
Wow.
And we had that.
That's why you're okay.
In that way called in that box. And he brings the box into the dining room, and he opens it up, and he sees the Rebbe's dollars. So he picks up the Rebbe's dollars and he drops it like he burnt his hand. And he's sitting there looking at the dollars on the floor. When the second guy comes in, he sees the dollars on the floor. He says, what dollars on the floor? He runs over and picks it up, and he drops it like he burnt his hand. This is what's going on in front of our eyes, He drops it like he burnt his hand. And they both stand there looking at it when the third guy comes in, and he sees on the floor, and he says, why are you guys leaving it on the floor? And he starts to bend down to pick it up, and the other two start screaming, don't touch it, there's something wrong with it, and you just don't touch it, there's something wrong with that money. So the guy backs off, he does this. Anyway, and there was my wife at one point, she was sitting near the books, the Svarim, so she turned around, took her Tillim, and she opens up, starts saying Tillim, and the head guy starts to actually physically starts to tremble. And he starts shaking. And he says, put that away, it's scaring me. Put it away. So she got scared. She just put it away. She continued saying Tillim that she knew by heart. And that's all. What could she do? Meanwhile, we're looking at, it was interesting. Another interesting thing was that after camp, this was Simchas Torah, so it was not long after camp. What happened was during camp, the counselors had made with the kids, like out of popsicles, pictures of the Rebbe, frames with pictures of the Rebbe. So when they came home, they wanted to hang it up in the dining room. We had a picture of the Rebbe in the dining room, a regular picture of the Rebbe. And my wife didn't want these popsicle pictures of the Rebbe hanging in the dining room. So she told them, hang it in your rooms, in your private rooms. Of course, kids don't listen. So they went and they hung it up in places that we didn't notice. They hung it up. But it ended up one on each wall, so whichever way we were sitting, we saw the Rebbe watching us. So it was there for that. It's like my wife looked and sees a picture of the Rebbe, and picture of the Rebbe, and picture of the Rebbe. And she says, oh, okay, the Rebbe's with us. Good. So we go. So then she started trying to explain to them, and I tried to explain to them that the Rebbe's with us. The Rebbe sent us here, and he's watching this. He says, I don't believe in Rebbes, I believe in Satan. And we go, it was a weird terminology. It was a very weird situation that was going on over there. But we're sitting waiting to see what happens. So meanwhile, everything. So he was playing around. He wanted to see if I would grab the gun. So he put the gun close to me, but he had taken out the thing. I didn't know, of course, but I'm not touching guns. I don't know. It's not my cup of tea. If I did, like my wife said, if she would take a gun, she'd probably shoot herself. She so I wasn't touching the gun, and he saw that I'm not trying for the gun. He took it. He says, "Good thing you didn't try for it, because I took out the clip." And he showed me. Then he put it back in. Now he says, "Now I have it." Yeah. But anyways, I see that the guy's bored and he doesn't have what to do while they're looking all over the house. So I figured, okay. So I start talking to him about Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach. So I tell him. So I start
Good timing.
I tell him, there's 7 laws that non-Jews have to keep too,
and
two of them seem to be very apropos in this moment. Do not steal, do not kill. And I'm explaining to him about the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach. Anyway, we go through this. I'm explaining this to him,
Sugya.
and he says, "Yeah." And then he says to me at the time, he says, "Rabbi, are you telling me that if I came back in 2 weeks without my mask and told you I'm the guy that's putting you through this, you would forgive me for what I put you through?" I said, "Forgive you for putting me through? You didn't do anything to me. If I have any complaints, what's going on here, it's going to be to God, not to you." I mean, if I'm unhappy with it, and if I want to complain to anybody, the only one I would complain to is God. You're a total non-entity here in this situation. I said, however, you have your own problem with God because God told you not to be doing this. So if you're asking me that if you'd come back in 2 weeks from now and you tell me that you're keeping the 7 laws of Noach and you want me to intercede for you with God, I said, I have no problem with it. I don't have a problem with that. Anyway, this is the way the conversation going. We're verbringen like this for until 5:15 in the morning. Finally, at 5 o'clock in the morning, he realizes that he's not walking out with anything. He says, "Rabbi," if I tell the guys that this was a flop, they put in 4 hours here. They worked hard for 4 hours. If I tell them there's nothing here, they're not only going to shoot you, they're going to shoot me too. So, something? Do you have something you can give us? I said, well, we have a brand new computer. We didn't finish unpacking yet. So that you could take that if you want. We have my daughter left her video camera here. So if you want to take that, that's what you want to take. My wife offered him her diamond ring, the engagement ring. So they took that, and they left at 5:15 in the morning. They left at 5:15 in the morning, and Baruch Hashem, I was able to go off to dance in Shul Simchas Torah in the morning with a little bit more gusto. I was able to.
You didn't need vodka in the morning.
But that wasn't the end of the story. That wasn't the end of the story.
2 weeks
a
later.
year and 3 months, or a year and 4 months later, my wife was teaching a class for women in the house. I was in New York. And one of the women comes in late, and she says to my wife, "There's a guy outside that wants to talk to you. I don't think he looks like a guy that you would want to come into the house." She says, "Okay, I'll go out." She takes the translator. We were still in those years working with translators. So she goes out with the translator, and the guy says to my wife, "I was here once before." She looks in his eyes and says, "You're talking about a year and 4 months ago." And he says, "Yeah." He knew, she recognized what it was. And so my wife wanted to get back in the house, but she can't go back in because the translator's standing over there. And to say it in English, he knows English. So she says, "So what do you want now?" So he says, I want to explain what happened after we left your house. When we left your house, what your husband talked to me about the 7 laws of Noah took effect. And it affected me. And I decided to give up this kind of life. I left my gang. I went off to the city of Dnepropetrovsk, which was 7 hours away from there by car. So I went off there. And there I met a holy woman, non-Jewish, a holy woman, who I told her I want to change my life. I told her the background. She helped me, guided me, and I've become a decent citizen. I don't do these things anymore. And now she told me I have to come back here and apologize to you, so that's why I came back to apologize.
Wow. This has been an amazing opportunity to sit with you, Brother Rav. I want to thank you. But before we let you go, what is your message to the world out there, for the Bnei Noach, for the Jews, for everyone?
For everybody. Know that Baruch Hashem, we're going through a time when most people who don't have guidance are convinced that this is a terrible tragedy happening, a pandemic, and everybody's locked up in their houses, and everybody's going with masks, and there's fights whether take the vaccine, not to take the vaccine. People are losing their friendships over it. Don't get bent out of shape. It's all part of God running the world, preparing us for the ultimate promise that the Rebbe has told us that we're in that time now. We are now entering the time of Mashiach. And the message is, guys, put on your Shabbat clothes, put on your good weekday, your holiday garments, because we're about to greet the Redeemer of all mankind, not the Redeemer of just the Jews. The Redeemer of all mankind is going to bring total peace in the world and going to get us that we should all be working in the right way, in a positive way, with friendship for everybody, love for everybody, doing everything right. It's about to happen. And what is each of us have a job to do to prepare for it? An easy job. Picture in front of you Mashiach coming in the next hour, and act the way you would act if you really believe that.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a real schut to sit with you, Brother Rav. Not only a Kohen, but a Kohen Gadol. I'm big shlichut. So thank you. And thank you for Abidan for the kesher, for making this happen.
That's my pleasure. Thank you so much for coming, Rabbi. And
our pleasure all the way. Good.
All right.
Can you give us a bracha for our show and for the fans watching?
Okay. Since I am a Kohen, the best blessing I could possibly give is Birchas Kohanim, which is Vaydaber Adnei Moshe Lemer Daber Lan Babon Lemer. Koyse Baruch Hu Es Bnei Yisrael Amar Lahem Yivrecha Adonai V'Yishmerecha Yer Adnei Panim Elecha V'Chunecha Yish Adnei Panim Elecha V'Yosem Chosholim B'Samu V'Shmiya Bnei Yisrael V'Ani Avarachem. Should have all the good things, everything like only God can give.
Man, thank you so much for that.
Cool. Thanks.